thank you all for coming. It's a testament to the strength of this community, your interest in Cambodia, its past, and knowledge about its future. And I'm delighted to see you all here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you again, Shannon. So my role is very short, and I like it that way, sweet and quick. I am a coordinator representing of the Cambodian American Community Council. And before I start, I want to acknowledge our chair, Samet Mel, is in the house. He has been absent, personal absent for a few months. So thank you for joining us today. And I want to go ahead and start out by saying thank you to our guests. I'm not going to introduce them at this time. I'll leave that to Bong Bill. Our guests are here, not as an official format. They're here on a personal visit to the state, and we were fortunate enough to be able to invite them to be part of this program today. So the council is not covered the fee, covered the trip, travel, anything like that. They're 100% on their own. So thank you so much for helping us with that. Again, I will leave introduction to Bong Bill. He do a better job at it than I am. So, and before I start, I want to talk and share with you a little bit about the council. Who is Cambodian American Community Council? So the council, I go by short by the council. It's easier for me. The council has been in operation for about 4 years now in the community, and our goal is to do multiple tasks to enrich our culture, to work closely with our new generation, to empower them to become leader in the community. And that's just a short goal of what we're trying to do. And to keep it short, I'm just going to go ahead and touch a few points. The council, after 4-year operation, we decided recently that we want to go forward and apply for the nonprofit status so that we can operate in that capacity. So we are working on that. And every 2 years, we also organize a big Cambodian community events every 2 years, and we are due to do that on 2020. And also this year, earlier this year, we're excited to announce and share with you, with our community, that we are initiating a conversation about the so-called Cambodian Killing Field Memorial. That is not an official title yet, but that's something that we're going to use for now. So our plan is to put a team of our community at large. Initially, will be supported by the council, but hopefully eventually the team will form and make decision based on that. So that's kind of the plan and the near future plan of what we have been doing in the community, okay? So I'm looking forward to you for support in the future. Our means of communication is email, Facebooks, and word of mouth. So if you hear us make an announcement, please be proactive to support us. All of us are members of the community, and we need all of you to help, okay, to make it a better community for us as Cambodian American in this state. All right, with that being said, at this time, I would like to go ahead and introduce Bong Bills to, no, I was thinking of something, I'm sorry. Mr. Bill Ong will do the rest of the conversation, and he will also introduce our guests formally. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me if I talk without? So a little bit of a housekeeping. Restroom, men on the left, women on the right side, and if it's full, go downstairs. The same kind of setting. My co-facilitator is Laura Wong. She will facilitate the second block, second session on current and future. She's our future leader, I should say. What are the housekeeping things? We want to be on time. We want to be very much on time to leave here by 4:30. And I'm going to squeeze time here and there and just to make sure that we get there. Of course, we have some cushion after 4:30, but I do want to work on time. We're not on Cambodian time. We're on, you know, Seattle time. So we need to work that way. I know people are going to start filing some more as they come, because I asked them to come around 12:30 to 1 because of the parking being free after 12. Having said that, I want to go into business of the day. In first block here is about the past. A lot of people have talked about what happened to Cambodia in the time of 1970, 75, or even before that. Most of the folks that I've encountered in the past 10 years or so really didn't quite remember what happened. And mostly first generation, second generation wanted to know a lot of this stuff. And I thought it's a good idea. Maybe we can bring folks who knows a lot about it, were at the time in Cambodia, working, acting, and seeing things there. Now that I have time to look back and collect their thought, they may have something that can share with us. And thinking about that, we also want to be sure that we have the right perspective. So this is the first time that we mix folks who are expert from a US perspective, and also folks who are in the government, Cambodian government at the time, Lon Nol regime. So I want to bring these folks together and just kind of talk their side of it, their view as they know. It's a little bit of a disclaimer is that the council do not take position. So it's a position of the speaker. And we're just simply a community body that wanted to help, knowing that there's such a need out there in understanding and wanting to hear about Cambodian history. So we bring folks who has such good experience. If we can start with, who's the oldest here? Huh? They all are bongs. They all bong to me. Let me introduce Donald Jameson. Donald Jameson was a political officer in Cambodia, the U.S. Embassy. And he has written and speaking a lot about Cambodia, knows a lot about Cambodia, and even know enough to criticize. And he's married to a Cambodian. Okay. Is that Ming? Ming Top? Is she somewhere here? Can you stand up, please? Oh, thank you for coming to Seattle. Okay. On your own, supporting her husband. Just want to let you know that's a Cambodian woman. That she will support that. And the next person I want to introduce, Bong, I call him Bong all the time, but he's a friend of my father, former Minister of Security Council, National Security, Bong Wan Saw. He's been around here for a long time, working for the community. But I just, oh my God, he was a security guy. Not security officer, but security minister. Okay. So he will talk share his perspective. I think during the last part of 1975, just slightly before the fall of 1975, and share his personal experience also during that time. And of course, he's here. He's not from, he didn't fly in, but he spent the time to study and all these things, recollect his memory about what happened in Cambodia. And we have our resident expert, really, he lives here in Seattle, Kirkland, I should say that. Barry Broman, who held position as a political officer during the 73, 75, economic officer, I believe, and then political officer in 1990 to 1992 when we entered to Cambodia after the peace agreement. So he might know something, share his experience. He's in the field. Question that you want to ask, this is time to ask, or maybe start asking so that we can come back the next year or so to do more of those things. So could you kind of give a hand to them? Yeah. What else are they? Oh, on the question and answer, we want the presenters to finish his presentation. They've written down what they want to do. They've in a long paper thought, I think it's in a university somewhere. Where is Shannon? Okay, it's right there. Okay, you can access that. The document is available for you to copy and download it to your computer for your personal reading at some point. And we are doing stream live right now. I don't know who's there. Anybody in there? Oh, okay. People are watching that who couldn't come and start this. Any housekeeping activity? Okay, and question and it is recorded. Yeah. Okay, so it's available for you to access and download it. One more on the question. Please ask question and ask question. No comments, and don't need to give too much context because of the timeline. So that we can offer opportunity to a lot of people that want to ask question also. All right. Oh, you forgot. Oh, my coordinator forgot. So we've got a lot of manpower support from KHSA, Khmer Student Association, University of Washington. Yeah. All right. I want to thank his incoming president, David Michael C. Dang it. Yeah. It's called, all right. With that said, I want to go on right now, and I'm taking 5 minutes of your time. Want to turn this over to the panelists, starting with Mr. Jameson, and followed by Bong Bansal, then Barry, who will attempt to connect to the current and future, 1992. That's all we know. That's all the time that we have in terms of the contents that we wanted to talk about. We might want to do something more in the future, but let's see this one. All right, Mr. Jameson, please.
So today,
You have 20 minutes each.
Nyom Chmodan Jameson, Nyom Tulap Bukan now Stantut Sahat North America, now Phnom Penh, now Samai Satuna Rat Kamai, Nam Chatsap, Bukon Rambun Roy Chatsap, Dal Chatsap Bun, Droik Pinang, Chum Chaparam, Kita Swat Kamai, Chum Kamprang Rian, Mul Prawatisan, and Vapata Swat Kamai, or Skull Churot Chiang. Elani Nyom Ling Papuntinom, Yung Tao Swat Kamai Chit, Ral Chanam on some rap multiet, Yultiet, mid Niate Chimoy Mitpet, Min Mitpet, Sran Nang Dai. Chung Yung Chong Ban Yul Taught to Tiet, Umpi, Kit Kana Swat Kamai. And thank Pinung Chim Chong Ye Pisa in Anglais Pipru, Pisa Kamai Mensao, Chiba Elani. So we're supposed to be talking about the political history of Cambodia, and I'm going to talk about it since independence through the Khmer Republic. And if you just look at the overview, from my perspective, what you see is the political history of Cambodia since independence has been basically a contest between strongman leaders and an educated civilian elite who've striven to create a constitutional basis for democracy. But so far, it's the strongman leaders who've prevailed. And they're working from a strong basis in Cambodian history and tradition, authoritarian rule dating back centuries from before the Angkor Empire. And during that time, the kings had absolute power, considered semi-divine, so could not be questioned. There is no peaceful mechanism for transfer of power. So when a king died, there was usually a struggle for succession, and the losers were often killed. So under these conditions, the concept of compromise or loyal opposition, the basic components of modern democracy, never developed. During the French protectorate, things didn't change very much because the French tried to increased the symbolism and increased the apparent power of the king in order to help them control the country, even though the king no longer really had much power. But symbolically and in the minds of the people, he was still absolute ruler. So when independence came after World War II, or when the first steps toward independence came, there was no real experience of popular participation in government in Cambodia. So the first stirrings of nationalism in Cambodia came in the Buddhist Institute, which was created by the French in the late 1930s in order to encourage a strong Cambodian Buddhist identity, in order to stem the Thai influence, which had been very strong in the last few centuries. The secretary of the Buddhist Institute was a Khmer named Sung Ngok Tan, who I actually got to know pretty well when I was there in the 1970s. He became the first prominent Cambodian national leader. He organized the first demonstration against French rule, which has been called the Umbrella War in 1942. Called the Umbrella War because many of the participants were monks carrying their umbrellas. After World War II, when the French began to introduce self-government, Sung Ngok Tan and the Democratic Party, a new party created by mostly intellectuals and government officials, supported efforts by the Buddha. They were supported also by the Buddhist clergy, and they advocated a liberal constitution modeled on the French Fourth Republic with a constitutional monarchy. King Sihanouk, he was king then at the beginning, opposed this and called for a strong monarchy, more reflective of the traditions of Cambodian government. This debate continued during the first 4 or 5 years of independence until around 1955, when Sihanouk decided to just take control. He abolished political parties, established a single political movement called the Sankumriya Niyom, within which all the political activity had to take place. And the Democrats and Sung Ngok Tan dropped out of politics. Sung Ngok Tan went into exile, started for a while an insurgency on the Thai border, but then just moved to South Vietnam, where he actually had come from originally. A lot of people don't realize that Sihanouk, he has a fairly positive image generally in the West, I think, but he enforced very strong control when he was in power after 1955 until he was overthrown in 1970. Sometimes very brutal oppression. There's one notable case that you hear a lot about, or you'll find a lot about if you read Cambodian history. An emissary from Sung Ngok Tan who came to meet with Sihanouk, his name was Priap In. He was arrested, convicted in a show trial, secret trial, and executed. And after that, a 15-minute, or while he was being executed, a 15-minute film was made, and that was shown in all the theaters in Cambodia for the next month in order to impress people, I guess, with Sihanouk's determination to maintain control. Another interesting sidelight of this was there was three very prominent leftist leaders, very popular in Cambodia in the mid-60s, Khieu Samphan, Hu Yun, and Hu Nim. In the mid-60s, they disappeared from sight. Nobody knew what happened to them, but given Sihanouk's record, the assumption was he had them killed. So when they finally reappeared during the Khmer Rouge period after 1970, very few people were willing to believe that. They insisted that they were imposters. In fact, they became known during the Khmer Republic period as the Three Ghosts. Sihanouk also enforced very strict control of the Cambodian media and carefully limited entry by foreign correspondents or scholars or any outside inquiry into what was going on in the country. So from the outside, he was able to create the image of a very happy, stable kingdom, oasis of peace, he called it. next to the Vietnam War, but not being affected by the war. But he got a little bit overconfident, probably with Chinese influence. He nationalized key sectors of the economy, and he broke relations with the U.S., partly over disagreements about the Vietnam War. But the U.S. had been an important source of aid, especially for the Cambodian military, so they were very unhappy. So the business community and the armed forces were alienated from Sihanouk for the last, probably from 1965 or so on. Then he acquiesced in the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong use of Cambodian territory as base areas in the war in South Vietnam. And the Vietnam issue, very sensitive, I'm sure everybody realizes that, was used by Lon Nol and his other opponents to overthrow him in March 1970. So this brought a new hope for a birth of democracy. Now Sihanouk is gone. We have a new opportunity to establish a liberal democracy in Cambodia. And many of the old players, Sung Ngoc Tan and members of the Democratic Party, came back into politics and participated in this new opening of democracy. It was supposed to be a new opening of democracy. There was also strong support for Lon Nol because of his decision to order the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong to leave Khmer territory. But unfortunately, they didn't leave. In fact, they moved further into Cambodia and basically took over most of the eastern part of the country. Also, in part supported by the fact that Sihanouk called on Cambodians to rise up against the new Lon Nol government. And at the same time, the Vietnamese began giving large-scale support to the Khmer Rouge, who were really a very small, almost insignificant band of insurgents until this time, but they started developing seriously after 1970. And the big problem was that even though Lon Nol was willing to order the North Vietnamese to leave the country, his army was really not capable of doing anything to force them to leave the country. So what happened is the Vietnamese basically occupied half of the country, and the war was kind of stalemated at that point for the rest of the 5 years, with skirmishes and battles all around the edges, but basically with half of the country under the control of the North Vietnamese and increasingly the Khmer Rouge. When this became clear that the war was not going to be going very well and that the Vietnamese were not going to be leaving anytime soon, the political situation started deteriorating, and you had the same kind of factionalism that had developed earlier during the first democratic period, with various different factions loyal to Lon Nol, Serg Matak, Sung Ngoc Tan, In Tam, and others began to fight with each other. Very low morale. People were not very confident that anything positive was going to come out of this. And also, you had another ingredient at this time, was Lon Nol's brother named Lon Non, who was a meddler, behind the scenes political manipulator, and he just kept stirring the situation up further. So under these conditions, Lon Nol, the war was not going well. The political situation was falling apart. He became more and more dictatorial, took stronger and stronger control, and more or less back to the same strongman, authoritarian type leadership that Cambodia has known for many centuries. Also, another big problem was corruption. Corruption had always been a problem, but it was particularly a problem during this period because many of the military officers were stealing money. They were creating fictitious troops. They called it phantom troops, and then drawing their salaries because there was no troops there actually, they were also selling gasoline supplies, all kind of things to the enemies. So after around 1973, early 73, there was a ceasefire agreement in Vietnam. Most of the North Vietnamese withdrew back from Cambodia into Vietnam, and the fight was pretty much taken over by the Khmer Rouge. And they were by this time strong enough to better the Lon Nol troops, who were also having very bad morale problems. The U.S. instituted a very strong bombing campaign in 1973, but Congress cut this off and called a bombing halt in August 1973. When that stopped, pretty much the fate of the Khmer Republic was sealed, and in a year and a half or so later, it fell to the Khmer Rouge. So that's my general summary of the first few years of Cambodian independence.
The next speaker will be Bang Vansal. Minister Vansal.
Okay, សូមជម្រាបសួរបងប្អូនទាំងអស់ខ្ញុំមានកិត្តិយសបានមកចែករំលែកព័ត៌មានខ្លះៗអំពីមាតុភូមិរបស់យើងតាមពិតទៅខ្ញុំមិនអាចសរសេរពីមាតុភូមិបានមិនបាននិយាយពីជីវិតផ្ទាល់ខ្លួនដូច្នេះបានជាក្នុងឯកសារខ្ញុំដែលអស់លោកបានឃើញនេះនិយាយទៅពីផ្ទាល់ខ្លួនជាច្រើនពីព្រោះនឹងស្រួលខ្ញុំទៅសេមកតពីរឿងកិច្ចការដែលខ្ញុំបានធ្វើតាមពិតទៅយើងធ្វើការនៅស្រុកខ្មែរ15ឆ្នាំហើយយើងមកពង្រួញការងារនៅក្នុង2-3ទំព័រប្រហែលណាបាទខ្ញុំទៅសេមើលឡើងវិញមើលចុះនឹងកាត់ចុះកាត់ឡើងនឹងគឺថាវាពិបាកពេកក៏ប៉ុន្តែយ៉ាងណាក៏ដោយសារវេទិកាយើងនេះមិនមែនជាការធ្វើស៊ីជម្រៅនៅក្នុងប្រវត្តិសាស្ត្រដូច្នេះក៏គូបានជាខ្ញុំខំកាត់មកនៅប៉ុណ្ណឹងបាទខ្ញុំអរគុណដែលគេបានធ្វើជាភាសាខ្ញុំទៅសិជាអង់គ្លេសហើយគេបោះពុំជូនលោកបានឃើញនឹងងាយបន្តិចបាទពីព្រោះខ្ញុំបើសិនជាខ្ញុំអានទៅពិបាកអញ្ចឹងពិបាកតើថាខ្ញុំនឹង English pronunciation នឹងវាមិនចេះបានស្រួលទេគេស្ដាប់ខ្ញុំមិនសូវបាននិយាយតាមពិតទៅបាទដោយសារខ្ញុំវាអង្គបារាំងនឹងវាច្រើនវាជាប់រហូតដល់លើបាទដូច្នេះនិយាយនឹងលាយគ្នាបារាំងផងខ្មែរផងអង់គ្លេសផងដូច្នេះវាពិបាកបន្តិចបាទប៉ុន្តែយ៉ាងណាក៏ដោយខ្ញុំសូមអានជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសចុះបាទស្រួលបាទសូមហើយបើសិនជាស្ដាប់មិនបានកន្លែងណាសូមមើលលើក្តារនឹងគេទៅសូមអរគុណណាស់បាទពិតទៅខ្ញុំមិនដែលនិយាយរឿងជាលើកទី1ដែលខ្ញុំនិយាយរឿងប្រវត្តិសាស្ត្រផ្ទាល់ខ្លួនរបស់ខ្ញុំបាទនៅពេលនេះក៏ប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំមិនចង់និយាយតាំងពីដើមមកប៉ុន្តែជិះវាមិនរួចណាដើម្បីឲ្យបានយល់តើទៅនៅស្រុកទីយើងផងលោកសិមសុនលោកមានប្រសាសន៍ពីរឿងខ្មែរសេរីហើយខ្ញុំអត់បាននិយាយសោះក្នុងក្រដាស់នេះបាទតាមពិតទៅកិច្ចការរបស់ខ្ញុំក៏ត្រូវមើលទាំងអស់ទាំងខ្មែរក្រហមផងទាំងខ្មែរសេរីផងប៉ុន្តែជំនាន់ខ្ញុំនោះខ្មែរសេរីសកម្មភាពតិចបាទណាច្រើននៅលើភ្នំដងរែកក៏ប៉ុន្តែមកក្រៅលើភ្នំពេញនេះយើងដឹងមេខ្លោងអីចឹងក៏ប៉ុន្តែវាមានសកម្មភាពដែលថាប៉ះពាល់នឹងសេរីភាពប៉ះពាល់នឹងសិទ្ធិមនុស្សប៉ះពាល់នឹងសន្តិសុខជាតិបន្តិចដូច្នេះបានជាខ្ញុំមិនបានដាក់នៅក្នុងឯកសារនេះអូខេដើម្បីខាតពេលខ្ញុំសូមអានតែម្ដងទៅបាទដូច្នេះម្ដងទៀតសូមអភ័យទោសបើសិនជាមានការខំឆ្គងណាបាទអូខេLadies and gentlemen, I feel a bit nervous to talk about Cambodia at this time when the relationship between Cambodia and the United States is kind of a bit awkward. I feel also not at ease talking about the past. at the personal level, especially after the regime change in Cambodia in 1970 and beyond that I was associated with. Like many compatriots, I was most painfully affected by the rule of the Khmer Rouge. Even though I and my 4 children, in that way, we could escape to safety, my wife endured the tragedy physically and mentally for years before she was raped and killed. That picture was never off my mind. I told people of an old adage that say that history is to learn from, not to live with. So briefly, I try to share some of my personal experience for the posterity. Well, after my successful exam from the graduate school of the Royal School of Administration, École Royale Administration in French, and returning home from a 1-year study tour in France with the French National Police, I was assigned to the Special Police, dealing with matters related to intelligence and national security. It was in mid-1963, and not very long, I was promoted to Deputy Chief. And the assigned task was to track down the Khmer Rouge and the Khmer Vietnamese. The Special Police was also responsible for the security and protection of the Chief of State, then Prince Norodom Sihanouk. When the Prince traveled the country, we sent a secret agent ahead of time to detect any threat to the Prince's security. During the day of the program, a high-level officer will supervise the field agent to make sure that nothing will happen. At one of those missions, I was sent to Sweden, and on the way back home after that, the car driven by my assistant was whirling for unknown reason, causing the car to hit the palm tree by the roadside, killing him on the spot. While I was ejected from the car, and with a stroke of pure luck, I survived with only the left thigh bone broken. The French surgeon operated on me, putting me on the cast for over 6 months, and I was back on foot after 1 year with a little bit short of my left leg. During many trips as Chief of State, as Chief of the Security Service, and listening to the Prince's long speech haranguing the mass, I learned a lot from the Prince, the profile of courage, a nationalistic figure, hating the Americans, and later turned to China and accepted to assist the Communist Vietnam during the Vietnam War. During the years when the Prince declared Cambodian as an island of peace or consultative in Khmer, my agents were battling at night against the Khmer Rouge agent, and at one night raid, my principal assistant was hit with a Khmer Rouge agent bullet that lodged in his liver. Luckily, the famous Professor Dr. Phnom operated successfully on him, and he survived the ordeal. And another raid in the southern outskirts of Phnom Penh, Kang Kach Yêu, alias the Khmer Rouge butcher, did escape on time from our hunt by only a few hours. Our service was successfully prevented from their terrorist plan. This is no wonder why, in his testimony before the Khmer Rouge court, Dick stated that when he moved to Phnom Penh after the Khmer Rouge victory, he stopped first by my residence to check for something before moving to Marshal Lionel Howe. During the late 60s, the Khmer Rouge leadership in the jungle was greatly improved with the addition in ranks of Khmer Samphan, Hu Yun, and Phnom. Detailed information can be found in how Pol Pot come to power. But the subversive activities in Phnom Penh were reduced. The communication between the Khmer women from Hanoi and their contact were also reduced. But the increase of activities of the communist Vietnamese at the borders and their agent in Phnom Penh were worrisome. I remember a trip with General Successor Khan to the borders in Sweden to negotiate for the Viet Cong commander to withdraw from our territory, but with inconclusive result. No wonder that the political change started with a public demonstration in Sweden, then to Phnom Penh with the demonstration against the North Vietnam and Vietcong diplomatic missions and the rupture of relation with those countries and their communist supporters. These were having direct effect on the change of regime in Phnom Penh on March 18, 1970. With then head of state Norodom Sihanouk blaming on Lionel Prime Minister for fomenting a coup against him, accusing the Americans as part of the plot. In fact, it was a vote of non-confidence against the prince and his refusal to accept the true situation on the dangers caused by the communist Vietnamese against our nation. Excuse me. With the call of the prince from Peking for insurgency against the new Phnom Penh government and the positive response from the Khmer Rouge and the communist Vietnamese, with the support from the communist China, the Vietnam War was extended from Cambodia, to Cambodia with all its consequences. During that time, I was and continue to be the deputy chief of the special police, despite change at the top of the leadership of the national police and the shake-up in the government with some removal of people sympathetic to the prince. I am not a politician, and my education, skill, and characters all made me a professional within the police. Not long after the change, I was promoted chief of the special police. In early 19th century, Director General of the National Police. I was strongly and seriously working hard to fight against infiltration to Phnom Penh of Khmer Rouge cadre and terrorists and to dismantle their network. There was some grenade attack, but most perpetrators were identified and sent to justice. Our ultimate goals were that there were no armed insurrection from within. Armed cache were seized in few sites within the city, and the security problem were the nightly rocket attack from the outside of the Phnom Penh. We were closely working with the military intelligence network. I know, and we know, that the military situation and the political situation were not good with the massive intervention of the North Vietnamese forces in Cambodia and the planned withdrawal of the United States from Vietnam. But there was nothing we can do. People talk a lot about corruption in the military. On this, you can refer to books written by General Successor Khan and by General Sustain Fernandez. When I was nominated as Under-Secretary of State for National Security, after I returned from Vienna in Austria, attending the assembly of the Interpol or International Police in the fall of 1973, I was also in charge of the technical command of the Gendarmerie Nationale, the extended force of the military police. During that trip, the U.S. Embassy has also arranged for me to make a short visit to Washington, D.C. and to New York. I was with my wife in Paris before heading back home. I know that the situation was bad and I could find a reason not to return to Cambodia, but I could not do it for the love of my 4 children in Phnom Penh. It was of no secret that since the Paris Peace Conference in 1973 between the US and North Vietnam, there were secret contacts to try to talk with Princeton to end the war in Cambodia, but with nothing out of it. Prime Minister Lomboret made me Minister for National Security in the last initiative. I told him I did not want it, but he insisted. He refused the U.S. offer to evacuate in April 12, 1975. So do the whole cabinet by solidarity, except General Sukham Khoi, the nominal president of the Khmer Republic, with another member of the government, Monsieur Lombota. Princess Sirimatak wrote a sad note to Ambassador Dean, choosing to stay and die in his country, also saying that he made the mistake in believing in America. Back to myself, when an Air Force officer dropped a bomb over the armed force headquarters in early 1975, I was with General Saksusakorn in his office, just 100 yards away from the building where we met. Both Prime Minister Lomboret and General Saksusakorn were my saviors in different ways. I owe my life to them in different situations. On the last day of the Khmer Republic, we were talking about a plan for the Air Force helicopter to lift us, member of government, out with waiting site in the field near Wat Bottom, next to the building of the National Assembly. We were there early morning on April 17, 1975, and waiting until daybreak, but see nothing coming. And we break out desperately in our own way. It was a long story of despair, but to make it short, chance drove me back to Prime Minister Lomboret home, and there I met him and our former Minister Thong Lum Huong. Mr. Lomboret told me that there is a helicopter waiting for us at the Olympic Stadium, and we have to rush there now. I jumped into the driver's seat of the car nearby with Thong Lum Huong on my side and the Prime Minister in the passenger seat behind. And at full speed, I drove passing the crowded street, and there we were at the stadium where we met General Saksusakorn, his wife, and Mrs. Serik Matak, and a small group of officers next to the helicopter, with a pilot working on installing a battery. We all climbed into the helicopter, but from there, Mr. Lomboret saw his wife waiting many yards away. He climbed out to join her, hoping to catch the helicopter whose pilot was just walking in. But he and his family did not have a chance to reach that helicopter and were left behind to his fate. This is how I owe my life to Mr. Lomboret, who shared the ride from his home to the helicopter, and to General Saksusakorn, who accepted me on board of the helicopter. As a Buddhist, I believe in destiny, and because God wants me to live, I pledge to do what I can to help my compatriot less fortunate, to pay tribute to my wife who was suffered long years and killed by the Khmer Rouge, and to help my sibling and relatives in Cambodia. I was then initiating the setup of community organization to help our people first in this Western state, then at the national level. Alongside with that, I joined the resistance supporting Prince Sihanouk Initiative in Pyongyang and Peking, and later becoming an activist for the Khmer People National Liberation Front under the Patriarch Son Sann leadership. Because of personal family situation, I could not be at the front line, but was very busy mobilizing support the rear until the signing of the Paris Peace Agreement on October 23rd, 1991. Reflecting on the change in the March 18, 1970, many people blame for it is the root cause of the tragedy thereafter. I think we should look at what is the real cause of the problem. In all her past history, Cambodia was a kingdom ruled by monarch, good or bad or whatever. Anyway, Cambodia got her independence from France on November 9, 1953, after 9 years of French occupation protectorate. It was not complete because the Communist Vietnamese troops were still in Cambodia. It was until the Geneva Conference on Indochina in 1954 that the independence was complete and formally recognized by all parties. But there is some clause to it. One of them is for Cambodia to be fully neutral. And Prince Norom Sihanouk violated that clause and moved bit by bit to the communist side. He was turning to politics, creating the Sangkum that absorbed all other party little by little, making a one-party democracy nobody could challenge. He did little to keep the monarchy alive and flourish. I'm sorry to say that the situation then and now is having a similarity, and worse now, Cambodia is under double jeopardy. Cambodia did have the Paris Peace Agreement signed October 23rd, 1991 to her rescue, but dominant political party, the Cambodian People Party, like the also Cambodian, wanted to rule for life without challenge. Before, Cambodia has only the tiger and crocodile. Now she has the big dragon that were watching over, waiting to strike. Learning from the past, I think as Cambodian American, we are having a dilemma to choose between America and China. Learning from the past experience, Cambodia is better off by choosing none of them. Go neutral as the Paris Agreement prescribed. I mean fully neutral, abolishing all treaties and cooperation with any country, the way Switzerland operate and govern. What I mean is that we need America to help Cambodia through the United Nations so she can achieve that route. And in her internal politics, Cambodia needs to embrace true and genuine democracy, the rule by many, not by a dominant figure or a party. And all Cambodian Americans must unite to support this policy, keep the PPA of 1991 alive and well, and ensure its full implementation. This is what I can share. Thank you so very much for your attention.
Thank you. Turn this directly to Mr. Barry Broman.
Good afternoon. There's some seats up front here for those standing in the back if you want to fill in. I'm Barry Broman, and much of my government career was spent working on, in, or around Cambodia. So I'm very happy to be here today to talk a little bit about the history of the country as I saw it live. I was first in Phnom Penh on the 1st of May, 1963, when I was the Associated Press photographer in Bangkok, Thailand. I was in Cambodia on an assignment covering the state visit of Chinese President Liu Shaoqi. And Prince Sihanouk conducted a week-long visit, which I followed closely. I was the only foreign
the only Western photographer present. A lot of Chinese, Viet Cong, others. It was very interesting. Sihanouk canceled all the reservations at Angkor Wat for tourists, and he conducted the tour of Liu Shaoqi himself. It was an incredible experience. My first time at Angkor, no other people there. Then I returned to University of Washington in '63, got my bachelor's degree in political science in '67, master's degree, Southeast Asian studies in '68. Went into the Marine Corps, fought in Vietnam, got out, joined the State Department. My first assignment was Cambodia. I returned to Phnom Penh the 1st of May, 1973, 10 years to the day I was first there. For 2 years, I was the economic commercial officer in the embassy. And once Cambodia fell in '75, I was on the last embassy flight out, fixed wing flight out, taking documents and some people. 4 days later, the helicopters came in for the evacuation. I would say now, just for the record, that when we knew, of course, once Congress voted down money for support to the Khmer Republic, it was absolutely clear that the country would fall, and it would fall soon. Cambodia literally fought to the last bullet. There were 2 bombs left at Po Chin Tong in the Khmer Air Force arsenal. I'd been with the Special Forces the week before out on the northern dike, 6 kilometers north. Normally, the parachute battalion had 512 men. They were down to 52. And the battalion commander had told his troops not to get haircuts. That when the war ended, they were to try to make it back to their villages and pretend they'd never been in the military. When it was clear that the helicopters would come to take out the American embassy and other allied personnel, there was one of our officers, Tim Carney, who couldn't be here today. Tim went to the Prime Minister and said that we would take out all members of the cabinet leadership of the country on the helicopters. Long Barrett convened the ministers. They voted to stay, and they were all killed. The helicopters left with 345 empty seats that could have been filled if they wanted to leave their country, but they didn't go. So from '75, '79, I was in Thailand. I was working very much on Cambodia, watching the developments of the Khmer Rouge from Thailand and along the border, talking to refugees and people like that. In between '81 and '84, I was in Paris in the embassy, very much working on Cambodia. At that time, Prince Sihanouk had given up his support to the Khmer Rouge, made it to France, and began a royalist resistance to the Vietnamese installed Heng Samrin government in Phnom Penh. The Enki was his military force. At the same time in Paris, the non-communist, non-royal resistance force, the KPNLF, was founded by Son Sann. And at that time, the Americans began very slowly to give support to the non-communist resistance. I say the non-communist because the Khmer Rouge were already in resistance to the Vietnamese invaders. They pushed into Thailand, and they were supported primarily by China. But the non-communists were united against the Vietnamese puppet government of Heng Samrin, but did not cooperate with the Khmer Rouge. And also, for the record, the United States, which, especially during the Reagan years, gave more and more support to the non-communists. At no time, never did we give any support to the Khmer Rouge. In fact, a lot of the weaponry supplied by China to the Khmer Rouge was kept by the Royal Thai Army, especially tanks and artillery, and never was delivered. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened after the fall of Phnom Penh in '75. Almost immediately, a resistance grew up along the Thai border of people who had escaped the Khmer Rouge. It was small, it was fairly ineffective, but some of the leadership, especially General Dien Dell had been a major general in the Khmer Army, as Khmer Krom. He had the Croix de Guerre, I think, 17 times. He's one of the most decorated soldiers. He made it out with a few of his men, and they set up camp on the Thai border, supported by the Thai army against the Khmer Rouge. Other groups, another group led by a former Khmer Air Force officer, whose name escapes me at the moment. He formed a group along the Thai border, and it was loyal to Sihanouk. So little by little, these groups got larger, got more support. The Thai army was always in support. Other ASEAN countries provided support. A few European countries provided support. And eventually America provided support. Non-lethal, no guns. So over time, and especially with support from Singapore, with militarily, Thai army with guns, ammunition, Malaysians providing training. Pressure was building against the Hun Sen regime, and by 1990, the Soviet Union was in trouble, and they had to cut their own support to the Vietnamese. The Chinese were not supporting the Vietnamese, they were supporting the Khmer Rouge, but very little of that actually got to the Khmer Rouge. It was held up by the Thai. The two main groups, the Sihanouk forces fighting along the northern border, based around the Thai town of Surin, held a piece of property inside Cambodia. Further south along the Thai border near Aranyapatet, the KPNLF established their own base camp inside the liberated zone, as they called it. They put increasing pressure on the Vietnamese puppet government. They were supported by clandestine radios broadcasting into Cambodia from Thailand. And militarily, they were quite successful. Captured a lot of the artillery used by the non-communist resistance had been captured from the Heng Samrin government, as well as half a dozen tanks. At the end of the fighting in '91, there were more than 20,000 non-communist armed resistance fighting from Thailand, but mostly operating inside Cambodia. And this pressure ultimately led to the Paris Agreement of '91, which then led to the involvement of the United Nations in setting up free and fair elections, which were won by the royalists, and Prince Ranariddh became prime minister. What happened after that, I won't go into now, but perhaps you'll hear more about it in the afternoon and the rise of Hun Sen. I have brought some photographs along that I took in Cambodia during the war, and a couple of the Khmer Rouge when they came in '79 into Thailand. So have a look when you have a chance. And are there any questions? I can answer. Okay.
Oh, Kevin?
After World War II, many of the European countries tried to reclaim their colonies in Southeast Asia, the previously Japanese occupied territories, and fought bloody wars in Malaya, Indonesia, of course, Vietnam. But almost a year before the French lost at Dien Bien Phu, they voluntarily ceded their protectorate and gave Cambodia independence. What was the background on that? I've never understood why France fought so hard to keep Vietnam, but gave up Cambodia.
Let me give you my thoughts on that. The French were desperate to hold Vietnam. Cambodia had almost no fighting. In fact, a lot of the French colonial troops many were Cambodian, especially Khmer Krom, because Khmer Krom are ethnic Cambodians from South Vietnam and very good fighters. It was politically smart for the French to give Cambodia independence. Cambodia wasn't fighting. And in fact, neither was Laos. There was no fighting going on essentially in Laos. So it just made sense for them to start by giving independence to Cambodia.
I'm understanding then why they wanted to keep Vietnam and not the rest of their China colony.
Well, I think that you're talking really, you should be talking to a Frenchman about this, but I'm going to be sharing my thoughts. The fighting was all in Vietnam. It was mostly in North Vietnam. And the French by no means lost every battle. They just lost a lot of people. And like America later, they lost public support back home. So it just made good sense to let Laos didn't get involved because there's no fighting there. But Cambodia was smart, plus Sihanouk, a very smart fellow. And he parlayed it well.
There was Sihanouk organized what he called the Crusade for Independence and created a lot of, he toured the world, came to Washington, went to France, a few other places, and created a lot of international opinion against the French. And since Cambodia was not a key element of their Indochina possessions, I think they just decided it was easier to concede there and focus on Vietnam.
I have two, excuse me. I have two questions. One's to Mr. Broman and other one to Mr. Wansaw. First of all, I am Jasum from Olympia. I live in Washington State too. So I heard your brief background about Southeast Asia issue. I'm interested to ask about a question about the what do you think about President Donald Trump's administration toward the problem in South China Sea? To Broman and to Mr. Wansaw is in 1969, Cambodia under Prince Sihanouk had violated Neutrality Act by providing sanctuary for Vietcong to stay in Cambodia territory to fight against American troops in South Vietnam. Recently, we heard the rumor by the newspaper stating that Cambodian government had leased the seaport to China for 99 years to build a naval base in Cambodia. So if this rumor true, what is the consequence of Cambodian government? That's my question.
Okay, I'll take the first question. I was hoping no one would mention the T word because I go out of my way to avoid talking about American politics to anybody. But to answer your question, it's very unclear to me what policy the president has in mind for Southeast Asia at the moment, and especially what the policy is going to be against Chinese aggression or aggression in the maritime areas of Southeast Asia. The U.S. Navy is constantly proving that or showing that we don't abide by the activities and actions and construction activity of the Chinese in the Spratlys and the Paracels and other atolls in the South China Sea. This, of course, can become dangerous unless it's handled very carefully, and I'm not at all sure it's being handled very carefully right now. But I think it's clear that the aggression is on the Chinese side. The principal country involved is Vietnam, ironically, the old ally of the Chinese. However, we should remember that in 1979, when Vietnam was fed up with the activity and unilateral action of Pol Pot in Cambodia and invaded, this upset the Chinese very much because Cambodia was the Pol Pot regime was the only friend they had was China. And to show, as they said, to teach the Vietnamese a lesson, the Chinese invaded Vietnam in the north for about 3 weeks. Now, in teaching the Vietnamese a lesson, the Chinese lost about 30,000 dead because they walked into a well-armed, well-trained, resourceful bunch of troops who I remember from Vietnam myself in 1969 in the 5th Regiment of the Marine Corps. So the Chinese and the Vietnamese really are the people most likely to get involved in a shooting war. I don't see the U.S. getting involved on the Vietnamese side, although the Chinese have taken property that belonged to probably the Philippines and maybe some from Indonesia in the south. So it's a vexing problem, and the Chinese are flexing their muscle while building aircraft carriers.
Excuse me. So I just wanted to thank you for your answer. I just wanted to remind questioners that please start with one question, so it's easier for folks to answer, and also give opportunities for others who wants to ask questions. I'd like to stay in the context of the past history of Cambodia, if possible. Just, we're not set up, not designed to answer such a heavy question sometimes. All right, the next one, please.
Okay. Nice to have our friend here disappointed without the answer. Okay. When he talk about the South China Sea, it's just a few words. Okay. Yeah. We have to understand what is China now. What is its stand? Okay. In a few words, we should say that China having two ambitions. Okay, want to rule over the world. You can do it or not, we don't know. Okay, and second thing is for protection directly. So you look at, you just understand the BRI will stand for Belt and Road Initiative. Why is that? And the other point is that to understand the string of pearls. Why is that? Okay. The string of pearls is the port, around the area. The pearl means that the China need to have some port to be part of the protection. The China is the South China Sea and beyond. Yeah, this is why China need Cambodia. This is the whole point. She can do it or not. This is why we hear about the the Sihanouk will. This is part of that. So to make it short, thank you.
Okay.
I have one right here, if we can take this one, and then I'll
Oh,
head over there.
okay.
If that's okay.
So keep it at one question at a time, please.
Sure. My only question, I think, for a former officer at the U.S. Embassy, Cambodia, I think my only question, I just want to understand, were there any effort by the U.S. government to fight back with the Khmer Rouge after Lunol regime's fall? I know the U.S. lost some public support from the public back home, but were there any effort to fight back or at least get the international community involved, especially the United Nations? Because I know the UN seat is really important back then. So were there any effort by the US government or their ally to fight back the Khmer Rouge back then? Thank you.
I don't think so. But at the end of the Vietnam War, the American government, American people were totally fed up with Vietnam. They just wanted to get out of Southeast Asia and not have any further involvement. So it was several years before we were able to start treating it as a normal area of foreign policy, and until maybe in the late 70s when the Khmer Rouge were overthrown and we had the Khmer nationalists fighting against the Hun Sen regime, the Heng Samrin regime. Then we began to get involved, but only slightly, because the trauma of Vietnam, I think, is like the cat who sat on the stove, hot stove. We never sat on any kind of a stove later. We just didn't want to have anything to do with Southeast Asia, at least Vietnam, for the next 5-10 years.
Okay, there's a David who raised his hand. Who's that? Yeah. Oh, right.
Hi, good afternoon, gentlemen. My question is, what's your comment on the Chinese involvement in Cambodia under Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping?
Take your shot.
I don't think, not very clear what the question is. I mean, the Chinese are involved all over Asia. Sihanouk was receptive to Chinese support at various times. He was a close friend of Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, so there was this personal bond between Sihanouk and the Chinese, and that led to a pretty good relationship most of the time.
So next.
I'm going to try to spot you as you raise your hand. I will go.
Good afternoon. I have something to add, but I also have a question.
I prefer that you ask the question and not make comment. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I know you, my friend. But just ask a question.
Why did you actually let the Khmer Rouge kill 2 million Cambodians? Because the U.S., I think, have a more obligation to save Cambodians from the Khmer Rouge. Why they left Cambodia? Because they were involved in Cambodia during Vietnam War secretly.
That's a good question. That's a good question. The short answer is U.S. Congress said no more money for Cambodia. And when that happened, there was no hope. Having been in Cambodia right up to the end, having lost many friends, mostly Cambodian, to the Khmer Rouge, I felt badly at the time, I feel badly now, that America did not live up to its obligation, and we got the Cambodians involved, and we didn't stay with them. And it's not the only time the Americans have done it. I warned people about this from time to time. Right after I arrived in Bangkok, after the fall of Phnom Penh, a senior State Department officer, political appointee, came to Bangkok, and I was invited to a dinner with him. And he made the comment that now that the shooting had stopped, the killing had stopped. And I had to say, Mr. Solars, you're wrong, okay? The shooting hasn't stopped, the killing hasn't stopped, and he was a Democrat, and he was very happy to see that the war was over. But I pointed out the war wasn't over. You probably killed 1 million people by cutting off aid to Cambodia. I was wrong. It was more like 2 million people. Of course, it was too late. But the fault was American.
But the question of moral obligation is a very, very complicated one. I mean, I'm not sure what you would have expected the Americans to do under those conditions when the whole, the army is collapsing, the war is lost, Vietnam is falling. The only way the U.S., I presume, could have saved Cambodia from the Khmer Rouge was to send in an invasion force of our own. And of course, we were withdrawing from Vietnam and Southeast Asia at that time, so that was not very likely to happen.
Next one.
Yes, good afternoon. I have two questions. One question? All right, I will take one question. What do you think the impacts and the effectiveness of the Paris Peace Accord signed in 1991? For me, I think it's just a piece of paper right now. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it led to at least the establishment of a new government in Cambodia, replacing the former communist government of Heng Samrin Hun Sen. And Cambodia is basically a free country, mostly because of that Paris Agreement and the support provided by the various signatories to it in the beginning. Of course, now a lot of people are asking why the Paris Agreement can't be used as a mechanism for imposing democracy in Cambodia. But that's not the role of outside players. It's the Cambodians themselves who have to resolve these political problems, and it's not going to be done by other people.
Yeah, I would add, I agree with that comment. UNTAC did a good job. They oversaw free and fair elections in Cambodia for perhaps the first time. The problem came when Hun Sen made a coup d'etat against the government of Prince Runerit. It's not the UN's fault. It's up to what Hun Sen, former Khmer Rouge leader himself, did. He's the guy responsible.
Can I hold off on online response first, please?
There's one online.
So we have a question from the chat. This is a question for all the speakers. The Khmer Republic, virtually no army, choose to take on the powerful Vietnamese army. Was it a wise decision?
No, probably was not a wise decision, but it was a very popular decision because Cambodians are always in favor of trying to get rid of the Vietnamese. So people were enthusiastic about it. I think for whatever reason, Lon Nol, the leaders, other people in Cambodia did not realize what kind of situation they were getting themselves into when they declared war essentially on the North Vietnamese army, with no real army of their own of any significance.
I saw Bongril raise his hand first, and then the next one is Sinuan. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Bongril and then Sinuan, please.
I think we have one in the back as well.
Oh, Michael as well. So Sinuan, you take after Michael, you take after Sinuan, please. I apologize if I miss some hand. I'll do my best to try to coordinate this.
Okay. My question is that according to the information that I was there in 1969, 70, they say that it's a coup by the United States against Prince General Amseno. But I would like to ask if you know anything about is that really the coup that organized by United States, or just the thing that the Prince General happened by the Cambodian people to topple him.
I think there's a kind of a syndrome in Cambodia where people like to blame the United States for everything that goes wrong, and then ask the United States to help solve all of the problems. And, you know, in this case, there might have been some encouragement for the Lon Nol people to overthrow Sihanouk from Americans in South Vietnam who had connections with various people in Cambodia, especially through Sung Ngoc Tan. But it was essentially the Cambodian run coup. It was because people had gotten tired of Sihanouk and his behavior, and because of the Vietnamese presence that he condoned, even though when they tried to tell the Vietnamese to leave, it was not a very smart idea either.
Let me follow up on that. When the coup took place in 1970, first of all, the United States, it wasn't an American coup. It was a Cambodian coup, and the people involved were primarily Lon Nol in Tam, and especially Prince Sirik Matak. So Americans knew it was going to happen. It happened. When the National Assembly met, they voted unanimously against Sihanouk. It's not an American coup. It's a Cambodian push. At the time, Sihanouk was in Russia. He was in France, getting medical attention in the south of France, Mougins. Then he was in Russia. Then, when the coup took place, Sihanouk was in Russia, and the Russians had to make a decision. Do we take Sihanouk, or do we just pass him on to the Chinese? They punted, and he went to China, and the Chinese took him in, and he joined the Khmer Rouge, essentially, at that time. But when the coup took place, there were at least 3 North Vietnamese infantry divisions inside Cambodia, the 5th, 7th, and 9th, and the 44th Sapper Regiment, which immediately captured Angkor Wat. This isn't Viet Cong. These are the real deal. These people had been in Cambodia for years. Sihanouk had a deal with them. Money changed hands. A lot of weapons and equipment came through the port of Sihanoukville. More money changed hands. And ultimately, Lon Nol and the leadership was fed up, and they got rid of the prince.
Okay, just shortly, I was there, working there. You know, the climate is, when you talk about the coup, yeah, you about tongue rollings, you know, arm movements or whatever. We don't have that kind in Cambodia at the time. Yeah, so it's hard, you know, for us to debate on that. But anyway, the lesson learned is that for me. This is why I said look at the root cause of it. Okay, yeah, and the root cause of it is that there is miscommunication. Prince Sihanouk don't want to listen to his officers. He was in France, you know. They sent a team of high-ranking minister, including Prince, but he refused to do that. So, what we can do? Thank you.
Sinun is next, please. So we have Sinun, Mike, and then the gentleman right there in the middle.
Thank you. My question is regarding our king. Would he be able to stay neutral if he were to continue to lead the country, since the Vietnam War was trying to, since the war, America tried to end the war, and everybody really tried to get the king attention. So I know that America wanted King Sihanouk to work with them, and it's not happening. China's taking favor on that issue. I was looking at the histories. It's really sad that our king didn't stay neutral and really neutral. Would he been able to do that? That's my question. Thank you.
Very unlikely, because the North Vietnamese were occupying the eastern part of Cambodia, as Barry said, main divisions there. The Vietnam War was going on. Cambodia just happened to be unlucky to be next to a war, and there was practically nothing that Sihanouk could have done to prevent the North Vietnamese from using Cambodian territory. and getting dragged eventually into the war.
Okay, I think our king at that time, okay, in the early stage of the history, the Khmer history, the king was very nationalistic. Yeah, in the beginning when I was starting to, you know, I was a young kid in the school, we marching at the independence ceremony, you know, he was very, very nationalistic. People like him. Okay, I accept that, you know, little by little. Yeah, especially after the conference in Paris. Yeah, it's true that he has some sentiment anti-American from the beginning. We should know that. And this was still since he was in when he left Cambodia to Paris, after continuing to Canada, to the America, and he feel that the American didn't like him or don't help him, you know, and he that sentiment, you know, was there. Reason why he's prone to whoever coming, yeah, and the people are coming first are the Chinese. Yeah, take him to the big palace, you know, the whole world clap before him. A big friend of Cambodia, the people of Cambodia. So this is the turn of the history. It's too bad.
Mike, and then Paul Brody, and then you.
Okay, so my question is, what was the event that solidified the end of the Lon Nol administration and the beginning of the Khmer Rouge?
Yeah, I don't think there's any one single event. It was just sort of a gradual collapse. People were enthusiastic at the overthrow of Sihanouk. They were enthusiastic about trying to kick the Vietnamese out of Cambodia, but unfortunately the Cambodian army wasn't able to enforce that declaration that the Vietnamese should withdraw. They were much more powerful than the Cambodian army. Then, as the situation became stalemated, you had corruption, you had political internecine infighting, the morale collapsed, and there was practically no way, I think, that it would have turned around unless somehow miraculously the North Vietnamese and the Vietnamese War could have been eliminated from Cambodian territory, but that was just not possible. And again, it's an unfortunate, as David Chandler has said a number of times in various articles he's written called The Tragedy of Cambodian History. One of the biggest tragedies is where Cambodia is located, and it just has been, unfortunately, also with Thailand. We haven't talked about Thailand, but it's stuck between two larger countries with which it's had very difficult relations for many hundreds of years.
I would say one quick thing about that time. Just after Sihanouk was overthrown and the Americans gave their support to the Lon Nol and the new government, the American army was invited in. This is the incursion that where the American army and the South Vietnamese had the opportunity to go after the Vietnamese sanctuary bases in Chup, Snool, the rubber plantations around the Parrot's Peak, South Vietnam. So we missed a great opportunity to actually wipe out the NVA and the South Vietnamese Cos Vinh, the South Vietnamese Communist headquarters that was located inside Cambodia. But again, we missed an opportunity. Nixon was under a lot of pressure to get out of Vietnam, end the war. And the incursion into Cambodia, which was done absolutely at the request of the Cambodian government to help the Cambodian army, which was essentially non-existent. And there was tremendous success initially. I mean, enormous stockpiles of communist weaponry captured. And then Nixon said, we're only going to go so far. And so they missed the opportunity of stopping the NVA right there. The only other thing I would say about the war is that if we cut the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the war would have been over and they couldn't have reached Cambodia. But that's another subject, and that's something LBJ is responsible for.
There's a gentleman right here, please. And then the next one is the Minshu. And then the next one is Harry in the back. For those that asked already, I apologize. I'm going to have to go around a little bit and then come back to you.
Thank you. My name is Tieng Viri from Cambodia. Now we talk a lot about the who violate the neutrality principle, and I wonder during his rule the country was at peace, and he was so much popular among Cambodian people. That means he was so powerful to rule the country, to lead the government. But then we also know that the country was at peace, but then he chose his path toward the communist bloc, not to choose the democratic bloc. And the Bu Wanso also said that he had the feeling or sentiment not like the American and something. But my question is that what is the problem? What is the root problem that he chose that way? And yeah, it is good to hear your comment or your analysis over that. Thank you.
So if I understand the question, what is the reason why Sihanouk was not able to succeed as leader in Cambodia? Something like that? What we aligned with the Khmer Rouge after Lon Nol overthrew him. So he was basically getting back at Lon Nol. That was probably the underlying cause of Sihanouk's decision to support the Khmer Rouge. I don't think it was because he liked communists. I mean, but he had no choice with the situation the way it was with North Vietnamese occupying parts of the country. And then he made some very bad decisions about nationalizing parts of the economy, cutting off relations with the US, stopping aid, which was run principally to the military. But actually, at the time, in late in 1969, he was beginning to change his direction. He actually reestablished relations with the United States in 1969 and was starting to try to be more middle ground, more neutral between the communists and the Americans. But he was caught in an almost impossible situation with the Vietnam War getting bigger and bigger and the US withdrawing.
Before I hand it to the next one, I just want to remind us to please be enjoyable with the conversation. Don't be so stressful. They're not going to say anything. They're not going to be able to change the world. This is an opinion from 3 people that experience it, and we enjoy to listen to it, and we have the opportunity to ask casual questions, some deeper questions. I'm sure they're not going to be able to answer.
Okay, this is a quick point on that. This is regarding Prince Sihanouk. Okay. We can say a lot of things about him, but he has a lot of horizon to explain to us. So what I ask you to please read the book called The Prince of Light and the Prince of Darkness, and you understand the whole point. Thank you.
I think the next person, the Minshu, and then Harry. The Minshu was first, right? Yeah, so the Minshu first and Harry. And then the own over there.
My name is Sue Miss from Federal Way, Washington. My question is regarding what happened when the Vietnamese army came and kicked Khmer Rouge regime out. A lot of Khmer was thankful for coming and terminate the killing field, but the Vietnam never left Cambodia until now. The question is, you probably could not say, could not answer in terms of UN, but I'd like to know if US and UN aware of that Vietnamese came hundreds of thousands of military and stayed there for now. Right now, to me, it seems like it's is a form of neo-colonization of Cambodia and Laos. So what would be the action? Is there any plan from UN or US to do anything? Because we have more and more people from Vietnam immigrate here, and legally or legal or not legal, they got visa, they got ID card and all that. So to me, it's a pure colonization. And they keep saying that they come to help Cambodia. Yes, we're thankful of that, but they should go home, but they never did. I would like to know your opinion on that. Thank you.
Right. Well, first of all, I'm not quite sure you're accurate in saying that they never went home. In 1989, 1990, the Vietnamese army withdrew from Cambodia. You had the Paris Agreement, which established a new political situation, a new government. There were still some close relations with the Vietnamese, I think, because the Hun Sen government had been originally established by the Vietnamese and supported by the Vietnamese, especially during the war against the Cambodian nationalists on the Thai border. But essentially, the Vietnamese left. And the problem now, as far as I can see, we go back and see it every year, it gets stronger and stronger, is the Chinese influence. It's the Chinese who are more a danger to Cambodia than the Vietnamese.
And Shannon, please overrule me if you see something else, please. And Pastor Chad, just to promise him, I will give you the opportunity, but let me go around a little bit first.
Thank you, Shannon and Pak Kun. And I also thanks Dr. Van Saw and Mr. Donald Jameson, Mr. Barry Proman for being here and for your informational speech. I think some of us are here kind of wanting to look for solutions. And my question is, what is your advice for Cambodian people in general, all over the world, to do in order to stop the encroachment from other countries like China and Vietnam?
Right. Well, Cambodia is a small country, and it has relied on assistance from other countries for many years, many centuries actually. And there's no way to avoid that, I think. The unfortunate thing right now is it seems like it's becoming unbalanced in favor of the Chinese. Too much reliance on the Chinese, and that's in part because this dissatisfaction among the Western countries about the political situation in Cambodia, Hun Sen's elimination of the opposition party, things like that. But essentially, it's up to the Cambodians over time to resolve these issues. And I'm hopeful that over time, you have a new generations of young Cambodians who are better educated, better informed, more involved in what's going on in the country. And I'm hopeful that over time, and it's not going to happen immediately, but 10, 15, 20 years, the situation will become more normalized, and hopefully some sort of a representative government can be established.
Okay, could I have a few words? Okay, we are Cambodian. I'm Cambodian at heart still. Okay. And now we have over 1 million outside the country. Okay. The problem is that we don't have the same view of Cambodia. Forget about the people inside Cambodia. Some people say that they cannot express their true feeling. But here we are outside and we still don't express our common problem too. Okay, so I think, this is my frustration. Okay, and this is why I continue to work, try to find a common cause, for our motherland. If we can do that, I think we will succeed. If we can do that, it's left to the destiny. Thank you.
I believe there was a gentleman back there.
Good afternoon. I just want to, I know you mentioned the situation about Lon Nol and Hun Sen, I believe, but I just want to understand their political relationship at the time, why they differ or they have a disagreement.
I'm not sure what the question is. I don't think there's any relationship between Lon Nol and Hun Sen. That's different times in history. Lon Nol was in the 70s. Hun Sen really became significant when the Vietnamese came and threw out the Khmer Rouge in 1979. So there's no connection between Lon Nol and Hun Sen that I'm aware of.
I might be thinking about Sihanouk. Yeah.
Between Sihanouk and Hun Sen, or Sihanouk and Lon Nol.
Sihanouk and Lon Nol. Yeah.
Say it again, please. Repeat your question.
I wasn't sure when he was explaining, was it to Mike earlier, was it Lon Nol and someone else? I wasn't understanding the situation or their relationship or political relationship at the time.
Lon Nol was a close supporter of Sihanouk throughout most of the Sihanouk years, but he and a number of other people got disillusioned with Sihanouk, especially over the Vietnamese issue, the Vietnamese occupying the eastern part of Cambodia. And I think Lon Nol actually was fairly reluctant in supporting the overthrow of Sihanouk, but eventually he was dragged along by Surik Matak and maybe his younger brother too, who sort of instigated the decision to overthrow Sihanouk. And it may have been that they were hoping just to scare Sihanouk and get him to return so that they would be able to try to negotiate some sort of a better arrangement for the government. But Sihanouk, instead of trying to negotiate with the people who voted to overthrow him, went to Moscow and Beijing and joined with the communists to fight against Lon Nol.
Thank you.
Before I start, I want to take a second to apologize on behalf of myself. We have put together the program so that we can learn from some of the experience that might have. We hope that that will shape your political support that eventually help Cambodian, right? It is an informal conversation, hoping that each one of us will learn something in addition to the physical understanding, the reading, and then you can shape your arena as to support somebody that helps Cambodia in the future. So I apologize for saying that this might not change anything. We will see. Okay? So who was next? I lost track. I'm sorry.
My ultimate question is, how do we remove Hun Sen from power peacefully right now? We know that Hun Sen violated peace agreement. Hun Sen killed democracy in Cambodia. Hun Sen violate human rights, and the list go on and on non-stop. We want him out. How do we do that? Can you help us? Thank you.
Right. Well, the first question is, who is the we we're talking about? I'm not sure everybody wants him out. But in the ultimate sense, it's up to the Cambodian people to find a way of developing a more representative government. Hun Sen's not going to be there forever. He's in his mid-60s now. He's already, as far as we can tell, thinking of some kind of a transition to maybe to his sons or some other group within the CPP. But this opens up all kinds of opportunities for new developments and eventually change in the system. But it's not going to happen overnight, most likely.
Good evening. My name is Sarun Sam. I'm coming from Olympia, Washington State. My question is, the U.S. is one of the signature of the Paris Agreement. Can the U.S. request to reconvene the PPA to save democracy in Cambodia?
Right. Well, first of all, I think if you were listening to my discussion at the beginning, there's never been democracy in Cambodia. So saving it is a big order. In fact, what you need to do is build democracy in Cambodia, and that will take a lot of time. And it's not really up to the Paris Peace signatories or anyone else. It's up to the Cambodian people. The Paris Peace Agreement created a situation where there was an opportunity for the Cambodian people to develop a more representative system. It hasn't worked very well so far, but over the long term, we can be hopeful that it's going to change. Hun Sen will leave and someone will replace him, and hopefully there will be a much better, more representative government after that. But there's no promises, no guarantees.
If I may say, we have about 2 more questions before we break and make some announcement a little bit. If that's okay.
Before I get killed, I'd like to give the question to Bonta Chat, please.
I have a lot of questions, but to respect the moderator, just ask one question, okay, before we go to break, and apologize that this is related to the gentleman back there. He asked about how to, we want to remove Hun Sen. My question is that acting CNRP President Sam Rainsy announced that he will lead Cambodian Patriot return home. I used the word to restore democracy, but from James Donaldson, he said not there never been democracy in Cambodia. So I say to build democracy in Cambodia. Given the current political situation in Cambodia right now, what's your recommendation? Should we return home by 2019 to build a Cambodian democracy? I need your expertise.
Right. Well, I think it's going to be the Cambodian people who build democracy, and it's going to take time. But as I said earlier, I think there's a whole new generation, several new generations of Cambodians, better educated, better informed about the world, more involved, and hopefully they're going to be able to evolve a political situation which is much more satisfactory than the one now. But it's going to take time and it's going to take effort, and I think it needs support from the Cambodians who are outside the country as well, and not just support for Sam Rainsy or opposition parties, because it's not going to happen immediately. It's going to be a slow process of developing a society in a way that can sustain a more representative democratic government. Obviously, the social conditions have not favored democracy up until now, so it's going to take time for that to change.
We have
you had over there, Shannon, please do.
Thank you. This is a kind of follow-up question to Mr. Jameson regarding the Vietnam pullout of Cambodia. Do you really believe that Vietnam really pull out of their troops or personnel all of Cambodia? Or do you have any evidence? Or you got the peace agreement signed, but and one article I read is the Vietnam hidden hand in Cambodia in faith. If you read that, the detail how Vietnam kind of hid or made their way into Cambodia without pulling all their troops and personnel out of Cambodians. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the burden of proof has to be on the people who say the Vietnamese are still there, because you don't see them if you go to Cambodia. So it's sort of an assertion without any evidence. So I don't think it's up to the Americans or the Cambodians or anybody to prove that the Vietnamese have left. As far as we can tell, they've left. There are some Vietnamese in Cambodia, but they're not Vietnamese military. They're mostly fishermen living on the Tonle Sap in very poor circumstances. And then there's some other more commercially oriented people who've migrated to Phnom Penh, selling, you can find them in the market selling things, but it's still a very small group of people, and it's not any kind of a threat to the country, I don't think.
One question, one final question. Somebody who hasn't asked the question, if I may, younger generation? Oh, right here. Yeah, right here, young folks here.
I know it's important, like if you want to change Cambodia, to understand the climate of how other countries perceive Cambodia. So I'm just wondering, is there any incentive for other countries to help Cambodia? Because it's small, I'm not really sure if there's any value to be had in Cambodia for other countries. I'm just wondering if there's any incentive to help out Cambodia.
I think Cambodia has a very good relationship with the other ASEAN countries. There's a lot of trade, a lot of communication, support for each other. Cambodia has good relationships with the European countries, import many of the garments that the Cambodians produce. Also good trade relationships with the US. I don't think there's a problem. The problem, if there is one now, is that Cambodians becoming a little bit too reliant on the Chinese. And hopefully that will be able to be balanced out. But for now, it's a concern.
So I'd like to conclude this question sessions and wanted to make one announcement. Oh, excuse me, sorry, Bob. Go ahead, Bob.
I want to make some statement before the end of this briefing. Okay, because I hear a lot of people talking about the PPA, Paris Peace Agreement. And in my statement, I also talking that the PPA is important. There is a lot of debate on that PPA is dead or not. Okay. In fact, the PPA is giving us spirit of peace and security in the long term. Okay. But except that our leaders don't use that for our nation. They use that for their own power. Okay. But we still, have that possibility of. This is why, when the U.S. Make a law, they all refer to the PPA. See, yeah. So if a lot of us talk about PPA, if people in Cambodia or outside the Cambodia, everybody talk about that, and we go to the nations, the United Nations say that Cambodia is the product of the United Nations in the 91. They spent many thousand or million, to that to happen, and to see Cambodia now dragging in the nobody, it's not fair. But we have to together to work for that. Nobody could help us outside, we don't expect the other people to they have their own interests. See, the Chinese have the interest, the Vietnamese have the interest, the Singapore, why they come out and talk? Because they have an interest in Cambodia too. Yeah. Here we are living in the biggest democracy in the world, the United States of America. Okay. And I think we should have a mechanism so that, we communicate with them. But it's not me alone or you alone. Yeah. See. So please working together. Yeah. And we can do it. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you, panel. Well, thank you, panel, very much. I'd like to end the session right now and take a break for 10, 12 minutes and come back for the second session. We're lively. You have a lot of questions about the future, and that's where we invite our panelists, former Ambassador William Hyde and Suti William Hyde.
I would just say one thing. If people are interested in the Cambodian Wars, you should take a look at this book, Cambodian Wars by Ken Conboy. It goes into great detail, and it's the definitive work.
Please be prompt to return. We will start right on time. The sandwich is still available. Please enjoy yourself. Thank you.
We need to remind some of these people that this is being available for the Cambodian government to watch later.
I know.
Just so they know they're being recorded.
How did he get it to go back to Spotify? You know? Oh. Oh, there.
Yes. So we need to just have the PowerPoints. And
okay.
I don't know, I just asked Michael if he could go find, I saw William like 2 minutes ago and then he disappeared.
Okay.
Do you want me to see if I can pull him up?
See?
Oh. Oh, they're already up?
Like they're open.
So ambassador will be first, and he is, do you see one? I think it says Seattle or something like that. Seattle. Not that one.
Oh, there he is.
Yay. Okay. Sorry, no, that's okay. But yeah, we want to bring, so his is first, and it is Seattle Symposium presentation. Whoops. Okay. And I'll take him. Okay.
Who want to show right now? You can check both.
Yeah. I don't know. Oh, we don't even need the music. You can turn the music back off. It's like already loud in here. I think, yeah, I just turned it back on, but you can turn it back off. William, yeah, this is the one that they want. No.
How you doing?
Good. Can't wait for
Okay, yeah. Where are other
Hey, question.
The thing is, I don't know how to get rid of this.
Was that?
Oh, okay. The thing is, like, I don't know how to get rid of this.
Oh.
Yeah, no problem.
When you go full screen, it won't show, right?
It will.
Oh, it does.
It
Oh,
can-
yeah, that's fine. So what are you doing? I'm doing what the thing does. Oh, okay.
Hey,
Yeah.
I thought Bongbir said we put the address of your evening within. So how do we use the I sent an email already. So they're gonna ask for that. I thought they did. He said he sent in to put in the bag, but they did not. How do we do that? Can
Maybe at
on
the
there?
end.
No, can
Or
we
do you want to
check along the way?
now?
After,
You mean after the presentation?
Yeah, after you put the. So this is it, right?
This is his presentation. This is
Oh, I I know, but that's it, right? It's going to talk, right? It's not going to read from.
I mean, I think he is because it's actually
Oh.
slides, but we can pull it up at the end if you want, and then people can take a picture of it. Yeah. Let me get it. Yeah. Okay. Do you have your email open right now? No. Oh, okay. They want me to like put up a picture later. Like for the invitation. If I send it to you on Facebook, can you log into your Facebook and download it?
Y'all need any help?
Nah.
Okay. Just making sure.
Actually, wait. Yeah, here should be fine because I opened my Facebook. So open here. You might want to not display the screen. Okay, well, I'll just send it to myself. Yeah, just go on Facebook. I should be connected already. Okay, messages. Okay.
Can I take a picture with you?
Laura. Here. And then just this one. Download that, and then we'll just pull it up at the end, at the very end of the program.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, yeah.
Are you the one who organized this?
Yeah, I'm the one hosting that thing later.
Is this in your apartment?
Yeah.
Oh.
You're gonna put your address.
Hey William, are you going to that thing at Laura's? I wasn't sure if I was gonna go. Okay. Yeah. Just asking. Do you know my sisters? Her and Jessica should be downstairs. Do you want me to text them or something?
I don't know.
Actually, wait. Catherine said we got you some dim sum. Oh yeah, she said it was in the car, but I don't know where she is. She left to get that. I don't know where she is now. Want me to go track her down? Get you your food? No, it's okay. I still have like half of me, so probably have to like. Alright. How you doing? You tired? Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't expecting to like like kind of control everything here. Yeah.
Did Catherine leave?
No, she's downstairs.
Dana asked her how it was going, and I was like, maybe, are you? Yeah, she like never responded. Oh, Dana? Dana, yeah.
I was just like in my bed.
Is she working today? No. Oh, that's right. She was off all week. Yeah, so lucky.
Why?
But she ain't making money. She ain't working.
Why is she off?
She wanted to do a mini vacation with David Finn.
Yeah. Wait, are they gone?
No, they didn't do anything. They just stayed home. They just stayed home.
Alright.
I think it's because they couldn't decide like what to do.
Yeah. David do. They home play Overwatch?
Probably. He's still on that. 2 years behind. Oh, I see you did that so it can screen share. I see. Just have to make sure that the camera can capture his face.
What space?
The camera, the live stream. They said stream live. Yeah, there's like a camera.
Is it being recorded? Like it's gonna be posted somewhere? My dad would love it. Because my dad wanted to come.
My dad's watching online right now.
I think y'all
I would like to stay for a bit of this, but I don't want another Q&A session again.
It's gonna be like that. How did you get here? Like 11:30. Was it last minute? Yeah. I can see that. Should still be recording. Okay. Wait, so where's the camera for the live streaming? Oh, and then that's what it looks like. Oh, right on. It's on Zoom.
2 minutes.
Well, here. Yeah, I don't know where he went. Right in the bathroom.
Make the announcement. Can you make the announcement? We need to start in 2 minutes or whatever.
If everyone could start heading back to your seats, we'll be starting promptly in 2 minutes. All right, everyone, please start heading back to your seats and we'll start the program. Can you make sure that those mics are on? I think I muted them earlier. The ones over there, yeah. There you go. Okay, are you going to be in charge of the slides? Like switching them or? There's a clicker. Oh, did he already have it? Shannon? No. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'll do it at the end. No? Oh.
And then we can put it up later on. That way they know. Sorry about that, guys. Run back and forth.
Can you make an announcement real quick for tell them to sign outside? Okay, that's something.
All right, can I have your attention, please? Please come back to the seat. We want to start our second program. And I also want to remind you to please do the sign-up sheet. There's a sign-up sheet on both sides. I heard there was two-way sign-up, so just follow the direction of the registration person there. And before we start the program again, I also want to invite everyone in this room to attend a small gathering tonight. We're going to do a small gathering celebration. We'll provide dinner, Khmer food dinner, from 7 to 10 o'clock. And this is the location, all right? We're going to put it up a little bit later as well. This is the location for the evening program from 7 to 10 o'clock. And the parking, you can find outside parking for free. But if you want to pay $5, you can park a little bit easier in the parking lot. So we would like to again invite all of us to join us in a small gathering tonight. All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Jamriapsua, my name is Laura, and I'm part of the CACCWA. I also graduated from the University of Washington in 2016 with my bachelor's in biology. I was the Khmer Student Association president at that time. I'm currently now a student at the University of Washington School of Dentistry, studying to become a dentist. Thank you. And it's my great pleasure to be here today and be part of this conversation. With no further ado, I'd love to introduce our next speakers. We're going to be talking about Cambodia's present and future with couple Ambassador Bill Haidt and his wife, Ming Sati Haidt. And yeah. Bill, if you'd like to start, you're on, yeah.
Okay. Concurrence, that Bande? Okay, good. So first of all that stuff that Don Jameson said in beautiful Khmer about how he was in Khmer and he has a wife that's Khmer, that all applies to me too. So I'm not going to bother to repeat it again. So I want to thank everyone so much for coming out here today on a Saturday. I know there's a lot of things to do on a weekend, so I appreciate that. Oh, my computer just went out. I want to thank in particular Bill Ung and all of our friends at the Cambodian American Community Council of Washington. And I want to thank Shannon from the University of Washington Southeast Asia Center and the Khmer Students Association here at UW. I see you back there. And I want to thank, of course, the audience as well for being out here today and for showing up on a Saturday afternoon. Now, that was a very interesting discussion we just sat through, focused on Cambodia's political history and its and the American role in it. That at times, you know, that gets to be a heavy discussion, right? Because that's elements of that history were very difficult, especially for Cambodia. And so I think that, but even despite that, Cambodia lives on, right? And so what I'm going to talk about now is where we are today and what I see as Cambodia's big challenges moving forward. But I want to make it clear that, you know, I left my job as ambassador in November. And so I'm not talking on behalf of the United States government anymore. I'm talking just like the three before us were, as someone who's had long experience with Cambodia, and I'm talking more like an analyst than as a government policymaker. Because right now the job I have, it doesn't deal with Cambodia. I thought while I was sitting here listening to some of those very tough questions, I thought, oh, nah, you know. I was the one that had to answer all those questions. Now these guys had to answer them. So there's an advantage to not being the ambassador anymore as well. But during my 3 years in Phnom Penh, I was struck by how often Cambodia's history affects the way the country views itself
and affects its relationship with its neighbors and with the United States. And so the discussion we just had is a perfect jumping off point for my remarks today. Now, I'm going to say right up front, there we go, that I'm an optimist about Cambodia. Given all the country's gone through, I'm still an optimist. And there's been so much progress in the past 20 years in so many areas, like this slide said. First and foremost, of course, there's been strong economic growth. The amount of poverty in the country has dropped by 4/5. You no longer see those very, very poor people all across Cambodia anymore. That doesn't mean they're not poor people, but there's many fewer. Social programs are starting to benefit ordinary Cambodians. There's vastly improved infrastructure, which means more Cambodians can participate in the economic life of the country. Cambodia is becoming a big tourist destination. You know, there were over 6 million tourists visited Cambodia last year, which is a lot. And you know, if everyone spends $20 a day or whatever, that's a lot of money for the country. And that's all of that stuff is starting to mean that that image of Cambodia as the place that suffered through that Khmer Rouge genocide, and that's all there is to the place. That's the way people have looked at Cambodia outside of Cambodia for the past 25 years. That image is starting to fade. And I know that many of the Khmer Americans are here because of that genocide. But nonetheless, I think we can all agree that there's more to the country than that. And it's time maybe for Cambodia, hopefully, to take a confident step forward into the future. And finally, but as you're going to hear from me now, in all areas, the progress Cambodia has made is incomplete. And there's much work left to do. Now, my view is that Cambodia's future is shaped by its past, but it's not predetermined. Things could go in a number of different directions, and that the choices the country makes over the next 10 years are going to be particularly important in shaping the future. I'm going to focus on what I see as the 5 biggest and most important challenges facing Cambodia. And the key point, and this is especially clear after listening to the first panel, is that these challenges are all interrelated. And I'll be honest with you, in many of them, you're going to see China, a role for China in many of them. So let me move on to the first big challenge. Thank you. And the first challenge is, can Cambodia develop high quality, independent institutions? That's a picture of the US Supreme Court as a symbol of an independent, important institution. Cambodia doesn't have any like that right now. And as you can see there, the CPP, the Cambodian People's Party, it really dominates all aspects of Cambodian political, economic, social life. That includes the courts and local governments, the military, they're all under the control of the CPP, and the universities partially too. And so I think the first big challenge is, can Cambodia move past that? Can they develop high quality independent institutions? And this is really important for 2 reasons. The first one really is that if you have independent institutions, it helps maintain political stability. And without political stability, you don't make much progress in any area, as we have seen from Cambodia's history. So if you have strong independent institutions, when you have political competition and you lose, you know that they're going to be independent institutions that will protect you. That's what happens in America. That's why in America, when a party loses the election, they say, it's okay, I'm going to survive. I might not be in government. I'll have to find a new job for the next 4 years, but I'm going to survive, and we're going to be back next time. And so it reduces the stakes of political competition. That's never been the case in Cambodia. The side that wins controls everything. The side that loses has nothing. In America and other democracies, it's not like that. And so that's why one reason it's important to develop independent institutions. And the second one, equally important, is of course independent institutions, especially courts and local governments. They give ordinary Cambodians a way that they can resolve social problems, social conflicts, conflicts over land, family conflicts, conflicts, with companies in the region. And that's really important. And frankly, there are a lot of conflicts in Cambodia. And so if you have no independent institutions that people believe in, it's really hard to solve those conflicts. And so that's the second reason I think that's important. Now, there's been a lot of progress in the last 20 years. Many of the government institutions function a lot better than they used to. More resources are flowing to regular people, especially in health and education. But there's still a sense that there really is no place, if you don't have any connections, if you're not a loktom, you know, if you're not a big person, that there's not really a place you can go if you have a problem with the government. So I think that's the first big challenge is, can Cambodia develop institutions like that? Now, moving on to the second challenge, and of course this came up in the questions and this came up in many of the panelists, is can we, and I phrased it deliberately to keep it away from partisan politics, but will ordinary Cambodians receive a real say in choosing their leaders? You heard from the presentations that there's never been a peaceful transfer of power in Cambodia. And that people, there's really never been, as there is in America every 4 years, there's never really been a situation where the voters chose a new government. And the electoral politics, they're not a deeply rooted phenomenon in Cambodia. But if you look forward instead of backwards, I think that finding a way to give ordinary Cambodians a greater political role is really critical for political stability. Now, there's two reasons to that. And the first one, I think Don Jameson mentioned, is that someday there's going to be a transition in Cambodia. Nobody lives forever, right? Many analysts think that there's going to be a political transition in the next 5 years. Now, the current group of leaders, they have a certain legitimacy given they were there in the difficult years in the 80s. They steered the country through to a better place today. They've been there a long time. They have a certain legitimacy, right? But the next group isn't going to have that. They're not going to have been out in the jungles. They're not going to have been in the war. They're going to be a bunch of wealthy kids from Phnom Penh, right? And so, you know, they're not going to have that same legitimacy. How do you get legitimacy if you're political leaders? You win an election. That's how you do it. And so I think for the next group that comes after the current group, finding some way to get a genuine vote from the people is going to be really important for legitimacy and for Cambodia's political stability. And the second reason, you know, and that's what this picture represents, because that guy, he's proud. He just voted, right? He's very proud. He's got his finger painted black there. Giving ordinary Cambodians a real chance to select their leaders, it increases buy-in, it increases ownership by the regular people over their own government. That act of voting is a powerful ritual, right, of democracy and of citizenship, of people getting a say in their country's affairs. And if people are invested, they have something to gain and something to lose from the system. It adds to stability. They don't view the system as something that's been put down on top of them, but as something that they have a role in choosing. And so it helps stability as well. Now, there are many ways that political participation, many forms for that. As you see, I write at the bottom, many possible paths forward. There's not one way to do it. I don't think, frankly, it's going to be a simple opposition victory in the way that some people think. But, you know, there are ways to open political participation, I think, particularly starting at the local levels, to give Cambodians a sense that they have a real say in their government, and I think that will help make the country more stable. Now, the third challenge I'm going to talk about is an economic one. You probably, some of you know that I'm an economist, so this is the stuff I'm most interested in. But Cambodia's done very well in the economy in their last 20 years. They've made huge progress. The World Bank now used to consider them what they call a low-income country, which are the poorest countries on earth. For 2 years ago, the World Bank reclassified them as a lower middle-income country. That's a much nicer category to live in. But for all the progress Cambodia's made, you know, if you think about it from a bigger perspective, the last 20 years, Cambodia is really their big economic competitor has been Bangladesh, right? Because their big exports are garments and footwear. That's what they make in Srok Khmer. And so, and Bangladesh is the one they compete against, and some other countries. But going forward, they're going to have to compete against countries like Vietnam and Thailand. And so the question to me is, how are they going to do that? You know, how are they going to, how is Cambodia, and this is related incidentally, of course, to the first two challenges, is related to political stability. And so how will Cambodia do that? How are they going to move forward as a middle income country and develop a more sophisticated economy? That's hard, I'll tell you, to be honest, for all small countries, that's a challenge. There are many ways that countries can develop, but the most common model, the one that's worked the best in Asia, is for countries to have attracted sophisticated foreign investment, so that to raise the level of the country's technology and then to raise the level of the products that they're exporting, so that it's not just simple cotton t-shirts and cotton pants, which are Cambodia's two biggest exports, but other more sophisticated products. We took a first step on that when I was ambassador, because we gave Cambodia a new trade benefit where they could ship travel goods to the United States, which are backpacks, purses, and bags of all kinds, suitcases too. And over the 2 years since we gave Cambodia that benefit, their exports have gone from about 40 million to almost $500 million now. So Cambodia, for the first time in its history, has an export industry that's not garments or footwear. So that's the first step towards a more sophisticated economy, is to get something that's more complex, takes more capital equipment than garments and footwear. But so how do you go to the next step, right? How do you get to that Thailand and Vietnam level of semiconductors? And Thailand has automobiles, they export automobiles. How do you get to that next step? And so that's the challenge for Cambodia. Now, I'll tell you on this point that China has a double-edged role. China's been very helpful for Cambodia's economy in certain ways so far. But the truth is that not many countries advance up the technology ladder by trading with China. It's just not the way they roll. China really, what their basic economic models to take either input low technology raw materials from their trading partners and to manufacture them themselves and then ship them on. So for Cambodia, if they fall completely under the economic domination of Cambodia, of China, I'm sorry, it's going to make it very difficult to make that transition to a more sophisticated economy. The real key for Cambodia is to attract that kind of foreign investment. And that involves making progress. Very honestly, if you're a big company, and you're thinking about investing maybe in 2 or 3 different countries, and you look at Cambodia, and you see a lot of the bad press, you think, I'm not sure that's the right country for me. So it'll be important for Cambodia to make progress on those political developments in order to attract that kind of investment they're going to need. And now, the fourth big challenge, and this is linked to the other ones as well, is this environmental issue. Is that, will Cambodia be able to save at least some of its forests and rivers, right? And to be honest with you, Cambodia is not the only country that faces this challenge. We face it in the United States as well. When you have an economy that's growing really fast and a government that's not too good at protecting the economy yet, there's a lot of there's a lot of damage to the environment. And that's the situation Cambodia finds itself in. Now, it's a big issue because we know from research that there's a close link between environmental degradation and poverty. If you wreck the environment, the people that live there can't make a living. And that's going on across rural Cambodia now. So that some of the people who live out in the Sruk Srai, they're having trouble making a living because the environment's not so good anymore. This is also a really important issue for young Cambodians, young people. Cambodia is a very young country. 70% or so of the people are under 35. And environmental issues mean a lot to them. It's very important to them. And so it's an issue that has political resonance in Cambodia, so it's linked back to those political issues as well. Now, Cambodia has an environmental ministry. They're doing pretty good work. For the first time, Cambodia has a basic environmental law, that describes how it is that the steps businesses and people have to take to protect the environment, specifies all that. That's the beginning step in any country. But but of course the ministry is still weak and it's not able to enforce that fully. And so there's still a lot of environmental problems going on. You can see, incidentally, that some of the impacts of that stuff down in Ceasefire now, right? You've all read about the flooding and the environmental damage in that area, that when you have that really rapid development coupled with not a lot of attention to the environment, it makes it difficult for the ordinary people. And so you can see that happening in Ceasefire right now. And the question is, will the government get more of a handle over that issue? Will it develop its capacity to protect the environment faster than that economic growth? And I think if they do that, then it's going to be it'll be really important to Cambodia, because as you see there, Cambodians depend on the land for farming and for fishing, but also because that image of Cambodia, those beautiful landscapes, are important for Cambodian culture, and also, of course, the tourists love them. And so if they get to a situation where it's the environment is spoiled on a broad basis, it's going to be a problem for the country. And then finally, the last challenge, and this came up over and over again in this panel. This is a very diplomatic way of wording this, because you can see a little Khmer down there in the red, and then you see a big China up there, right? So, can Cambodia maintain its sovereignty and find a principled, independent voice? That's kind of a foreign policy issue, right? It's a key theme in Cambodia's history. And you heard that from the panel. Sometimes China, sometimes Vietnam, sometimes the United States had dominant influence in the country. France, of course, for a long time. So Cambodia has always tried to balance those large foreign powers, as all small countries must do, and in order to maintain its independence. But, and very honestly, the external environment for Cambodia is challenging now. Other countries too, that great power rivalry, as they call it, is intensifying out there in Asia. All countries need to manage that. And so I think, should Cambodia fall completely under the domination of any particular country, right, that has big implications for the way the political system's going to work. It has implications for the environment as well as the economic system, the kinds of products Cambodia will make and export, and so on and so forth. So that's a challenge that Cambodia is going to have to manage. And it's really one of the big things facing right now. It feels like perhaps the country has shifted too far in one direction. I don't think that Cambodia's leaders in particular want that. I think they want to maintain some kind of balance. So the challenge will be, will they be able to find their way back to that kind of traditional balance? So those are the 5 things I see looking forward. And I don't think there's a predetermined outcome. I mean, I think it could work very well. We could look back in 20 years and say it's ahead, it's made progress on all 5 of those challenges, or it could go the other way. It could be, but I do think that it's going to be important for Cambodia to have at the end of the day, to have a very principled diplomacy to find a comfortable and an advantageous place in ASEAN, the ASEAN region, in Asia, and in the world. So I'm going to stop my remarks right there. I'm going to give the floor to my lovely wife. You're going to sit there, honey, and talk? Okay. And thank you very much, everyone.
Hello ជំរាបសួរទាំងអស់គ្នាជំរាបសួរដែលបានមកជួបបងប្អូនខ្មែរយើងពុកម៉ែបងប្អូននៅ Seattle នេះម្ដងទៀតជាលើកទី2ចាខ្ញុំចង់និយាយខ្មែរដែរប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំថានៅក្នុង audience ជើងមានអ្នកដែលអត់ចេះខ្មែរអញ្ចឹងអត់ចង់ឲ្យគាត់អង្គុយនៅនឹងឲ្យស្ដាប់បាន so I will be doing this in English, okay? Today I was asked to talk about the progress and challenges for Cambodian women, having lived there myself, and being a Cambodian American, I'm particularly interested when we were posted there and when we served there to learn more about Cambodian women and children. I have a soft spot for, services to the children, disadvantaged children or whatever, and a lot of Cambodian children are from the rural area that are somewhat disadvantaged in a lot of ways. So I pay a lot of attention to the Cambodian women in Cambodia, their happiness, their sadness, their business, their life at home, whatever. So and I when I was there, I served as sort of an inspirational speaker to various groups, various women's group, various children's group, basically just sharing information or giving advice on ways that they might be able to deal with situations that they're in that they might not know. There are other ways to deal with things because they've never been out of the country, or they have never seen things from a different aspect. So as far as Cambodian women or the population in general, there's a lot of progress made since my husband and I were there in Cambodia more than 20 years ago. Cambodian women in particular have the highest labor force participation. That means in the region, that means Cambodian women, the percentage of Cambodian women working are the highest in the region. So a lot of women are working in Cambodia, and women population make up more than half of the Cambodian population. So it's not, referring back to the economy situation that my husband was talking about, Cambodian women as a force cannot be ignored. It's a lot of people. It's a big chunk of the population that the government, if smart, can make use of to further the economy, the progress of the economy. And the quality of life of Cambodian women and children in general are a lot better now, 20 years after we were there in the 90s. For those of you who were in Cambodia back in the 90s, there were a lot of poor people, a lot of beggars on the street. You couldn't go to Russian market without throngs of children following you, asking you for money. It was just a very sad scene to see. You arrive at the airport and there were throngs of people wanting to help you out, just getting small tip by carrying your bags or luggage or whatever. You saw that back then. It's not like that anymore, and I'm very proud to see that Cambodian women have more dignity now. They don't have to survive on so little. There are still people who survive on very little, but there are a lot of women who have moved themselves from situations where they were living on very little, and they have more dignity. I know families that used to, accept donation from us. They no longer need donations. They are able to, afford their own lifestyle, and it's almost an offense to give them donation or a little bit of money. So for me, that's a huge progress in people's livelihood, and regardless of what's going on with politics, people's daily life has changed. And also, there was a lot of, back then, there was a lot of gender parity between boys and girls as far as education. There weren't enough girls going to school. That doesn't exist anymore. Cambodia has moved forward, and the number of girls enrolled in school are the same number as boys. So there's no more that girls are in school less than boys. The question is, how many girls actually stay in school to the very end, to, let's say, secondary level or post-secondary level? So that's a different question. But as far as going to school, enrolling in school from primary level, there's no gap. So girls are educated from a primary education level just as much as boys. And 98% of the population have access to education. So that's that's the majority of the country can have access to primary education if they want to. And basic healthcare, and I mean basic. I don't mean, any type of luxury healthcare at all. It's very basic maternity, basic stuff on the district level, on the village level. And more women these days are understanding their rights as citizens. Women fight for the environment, women fight for land rights, women fight for better wages. I mean, women are participating in a lot of aspects of the economy. So, and with that, the support from international community, donors and international partners and NGOs, they all have programs supporting women in achieving their basic economic sufficiency. So when you talk about women in Cambodia, I wanna separate into two aspects: the aspects of their work outside of their home, and the aspect of their life at home. And let's focus on their work first, their work outside of home. You see here, the majority of the women, 89% of the women work in, those who are working, 89% of them work in agriculture, retail, and manufacturing. So, traditionally expected female professions, but that's okay at this point. Cambodia is not an advanced, super developed country. So a lot of the works, as long as they are working, you're hoping that they're making income and they're working. So even though they tend to focus on agriculture, retail, and manufacturing, they are bringing home income. They are helping their families with, additional income. Of them, 70% of the women working, they are in vulnerable employment. That means they don't get health care, they work at a salon, they don't have insurance, health insurance, they don't have that stuff. So those are vulnerable employments where it's up to one person to say, okay, what's your wages, and a lot of women are in that situation, 70% of them, so that's a lot. A few women are in decision making. There's not a lot of women in politics. If you look at the Senate, basically the Senate, the body of the Senate has been consisted of 14% women from 20 years ago, and it's still the same. You look at the parliament, percentages of women in the Cambodian parliament had increased some up to the point when they got rid of the opposition, and then they replaced those positions with all men. So now the percentage of women in the parliament has reduced by a whole lot because they were all, the opposition positions were all replaced by men. Now, 65% of Cambodia businesses are owned by women. So that's a huge force. Like I said, cannot be ignored. But when I say owned by women, I meant anywhere from the woman with the vegetable with a basket of vegetables selling at the market to someone who owns Cambodia Economic Zone, like a big real estate, to someone who owns a dental clinic. So that woman range businesses that are owned by women range from a vegetable lady in the market all the way to a big tycoon who owns a lot of businesses. So and 30% of heads of household in Cambodia are women. And that's, I can go to it later, why there are quite a few. It's basically one in three, almost 1 in 3 households is head by women. Not because they want to, but the family situation in Cambodia, a lot of times the men left for other ladies already. And so either on paper, they still have, officially as married, but they're not really married. The men's long gone. So women have had to step up to take care of their families. And, you know, for women to start working and being part of the working force in Cambodia, they're breaking into men's world. They're breaking into roles that were not traditionally women. So it's difficult, even though their business had become what they call, you know, medium-sized business to sort of a semi-large size business. They have a hard time breaking into the men's world. As you can see here, the pictures I put below here on the left side here is the Cambodia Chamber of Commerce led by Kit Meng. And on the right side there is the Cambodian Women Entrepreneur Association. They formed their own group because a lot of the more successful women are not able to penetrate that association. The Cambodian Chamber of Commerce should be incorporating a lot of the women-owned businesses, but you know, it's such a male-dominant organization. It's mostly men there, and I even know personally some of the big female tycoons in Cambodia, and they can't break into that world. So imagine the smaller business owners ones, you know, it's a difficult situation for them. And the burden, you know, the heavy burden on women is, you know, when they have business outside, they have to double prove that they are good enough to have successful business, but then they come home, they have to be the best mother or the best housewife they can. So you know, all in all, it's a double standard. It's if they fail on the business side, then the men say, see, you never belong here in the first place, you know. But if they fail on the home side, then society, you know, the society put a bad stigma on them. So it's a double-edged sword there a little bit. There's still, you know, in general, there's just lack of institutional protection for women in general. If you follow a girl's life from school all the way to work, all the way to owning her own business or professional life, you know, to do with, for example, harassment or sexual harassment or whatever, a girl has nowhere to go. There's no channels of complaint. There's just nothing set up by, you know, various institutions, the school. I mean, you know, I hear all the time about girls going to school being sort of, you know, sometimes being made to feel uncomfortable by their male teachers. There's nowhere you can report to. There's just nowhere you can complain to. I mean, if you're not happy, you can just leave. I mean, you know, kids can leave the school and go somewhere else. So there's just no institutional system to protect girls all the way to when they work in businesses. There's still a large income disparity between women in the rural area and the urban area, as you can see here. Those owning big businesses, I'm not saying all, I'm saying most, are wives of some big officials that have the network to support them to have successful business in the first place. But there are also women who start from scratch as well in that group of ladies here, for example. So when, you know, when there's not a lot of job opportunities or economic opportunities locally, they look elsewhere for employment. So they agree to migrate to Thailand. There's like when I was there, the estimate of how many migration from Cambodia to Thailand is about 1 million people. That's a lot of Cambodians working in Thailand on jobs that, you know, might not have any kind of protection whatsoever. Sometimes a simple migration turn into trafficking, turn into all sorts of stuff once they get to that other country. You know, so there's a lot of issues there, and because a lot of the parents in the countryside have to leave the country for other jobs, not leave the country, but sometimes just leave their village for jobs in the city maybe, or even overseas, the children are left to whoever that was still around in the village to raise them. It could be grandparents, it could be a neighbor, it could be just, there's just a whole population of children that are growing up without their parents around. So I can now speak out, I will speak now on the life at home. To me, it's Cambodian women are very strong people. They're very strong, they're resilient, they stand a lot, they bear a lot, there's a lot on their shoulders, but at the same time they're some became very successful in their lives. But the men in their lives are very important to these women. Their happiness or unhappiness all stem from what the men in their lives do. And and it's a subject that that is difficult for women in Cambodia to talk about. Complain about your husband. So, and I would say it's a transitioning society where women are trying to gain more respect from the men, that they too can be, a head of household, and also to take care of the family, and that, that responsibility needs to be shared by the men counterpart. So in general, I feel living there, I feel that there's a general lack of respect for women in general, especially if they have money, especially if they are in high position where they can, select women or choose young girls based on their looks or based on whatever, or the way they treat their wives. I just feel like in general there's just this lack of respect for women, and I will go into that a bit more. It's an uncomfortable discussion, it's an uncomfortable conversation, one that in Cambodia they kind of sweep under the carpet, the way the men treat women, but I'm hoping we can talk about it here in America. And so there's a lot of double standards that they have to face, that they have to live with, and if there's something that happened to their marriage, it's the woman that bears the social stigma, the man goes off and, whatever, and it's a woman that stays behind that bear the term divorcee or widow, or something that men around her in the neighborhood or kind of look down at women who are alone, who are raising her children alone. So it's not fair. Sometimes the extended family makes it difficult for the woman in Cambodia, the mother-in-law, the sister-in-laws, the brother-in-laws, all the pressure and all the, basically the baggage that's on her to perform and please everyone else. Divorce laws is not, divorce law in Cambodia don't really protect women. It basically says that if you are getting divorced, you agree among yourselves how you will divide up your assets, and then you come to us, the court, we will sign it off. That's it. Can you imagine? Like, if your husband is some big shot and you're divorcing him and you're making him agree to giving you part of, or maybe half, or even not even half, like a third of what you have. Can you imagine he would agree to that? And so the law doesn't really help women out. There's no support system, there's not a lot of support system, and there's not a lot of people for women to talk to. And when I talk to university women in Cambodia, honestly, they are scared to get married now, the young ones. They're afraid to get married. They see how their mothers go through, they see how their aunts go through, they see all the women before them. They themselves are afraid to get married. And it's something that, as a traditional society, that it needs to eventually change. It can't change abruptly. It has to slowly get to that point where everyone can be somewhat happy. There are a lot of issues in the marriages. Women were willing to tell me personally, but if you have a seminar or something, they're not willing to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it out in the open. But I hear, personally, I hear so much. I mean, this is across economic background, from the very rich woman to the very poor woman. They have all sorts of issues with basically being treated with respect, you know, respecting the marriage, respecting her, that kind of issues. You can't get them to talk as in a seminar or in a forum where maybe they can help each other, or it's hard. It's a very difficult thing to talk about. And plus there's real lack of counseling services or mental health services, and people don't believe in that either. They're afraid of the stigma that they will be considered crazy for going to talk to a counselor. So it's not a situation where lack of respect for women and lack of respect for marriages, that causes a lot of other issues. I mean, that can be something you say, and yeah, they don't respect women, but it causes a lot of social issues. It causes violence in the family. It causes violence emotionally, physically, or economically. Sometimes the men stop giving money. That's considered an abuse when you no longer support your family. It's called economic abuse. Violence between women. The first wife goes and throw acids at the mistresses or whatever. Now the acid throwing has reduced by a lot less now from in the 90s or the early 2000s, but there's some other forms of violence still happen between the first wife and mistresses or whatever, and so I feel that young boys don't have a lot of role models. I mean, from my personal view, living there, I feel that boys don't grow up seeing, well, they might look up to their father as a provider, as a, someone who is doing well in his job, but I don't think they have too many role models at home, someone who is good to their mother. I don't feel there are a lot of them. There's a lot of, there's a huge population of absent fathers. A lot of the Cambodian staff that work for the U.S. Embassy, a lot of them didn't grow up with a father. You talk to them, I always try to find out everyone's family, where they come from and all that stuff. A lot of them. And I'm happy to say that, when you go to like Central Market or Russian Market or whatever, those ladies that sell souvenirs or towels and things like that, those ladies have been able to afford to send their children to study abroad from the income they make from those shops. Some of our staff at the U.S. embassies came from those ladies. Their mothers sell stuff at the Russian markets or the Central markets. So I was very impressed to find out, because when they work for the embassy and they speak very good English, they study abroad, they study in Australia or America, whatever. I thought they were sort of like connected to somebody big shot. But once I started to learn about a lot of our staff, they said, nope, my mother sells towels at Central Market all her life, and she's been doing that since after Khmer Rouge. And from that income, she's able to send all four of us children to study overseas, and we now have our own jobs and are doing well. So I'm very, when you learn that small business can support so much, can make so much income for her family, then you realize, okay, what about the guy that owned, that big shop with all the hardwares and stuff? He must, or she must have a lot more income than that. So they can afford it. Cambodian women are very frugal. They save money very well. They save every penny they own. But they are able to spend it on their children so that their children have better life than them. Okay. We talk about this all the pressure and children, young teenagers now are just learning a lot about depression. The depression is not something Cambodian society very aware of, but people are just learning about it and how to deal with it. You see teenager posting how they feel when they, what it's like to be depressed. And some are hoping to teach other people that if you feel this way, it is called depression, and you should seek help, stuff like that. There's that going on. But it's not all, it's not all bleak. There are women like these young ladies here. One is the one on the far right there is, she goes by Catherine Harry. I don't know what her real name is, but I think she goes by that name because she's very outspoken against what's going on with society, particularly women. She speaks on behalf, she supports women. And also DJ Nana on the left side here, she's also another one that speaks out and helps with, the injustices that she sees in her community. So it's, the later generation coming up, I call them the social media generation. They have a way of getting support, getting emotional support, venting out their frustrations with society. They have a way of doing that. There are a lot of fake accounts in Cambodia, as you can imagine, because the kids are setting up fake accounts so that they can voice opinion against, whatever politically or socially or whatever without someone coming after them, right? It's safer to have a fake account so that they can express true and honest opinions. So, but that's the generation, that's the hope and the future of Cambodia, I feel, that will be different from their ancestors. And they are very worldly. They read a lot about what's going on outside of their country. So that's the generation I hope we'll get to soon. Questions for both of us. And I put these pictures here because I want to show how resourceful Cambodians are, You want to take 10 people on a motorcycle, that's how you do it. You don't have a boat to go to school, that's how you do it. You ride inside the bucket. And, they're very resourceful. Never mind about safety, but as long as you get to where you get to. Okay? All right, we can take questions now. You guys can feel free to speak in the
Okay, that one's better. Okay, so as we're asking our questions here, again, I just want to limit to one question per person at first. And remember that this is a nonpartisan event, and so we want to make sure that we're not politically sided here. All right, who has a question for either of them? Yes.
Hello, such as women's and violence and things like that.
I think this works, yeah. So look, that's a great question. When I've spoken many times at Khmer American communities around the country, and of course that's always an issue. Is folks wonder how can we help, and I think that for Cambodia now, there's a lot of, as I said before, there's a lot of young people, very young country, and they are really interested in the outside world. Cambodians are, it's very important to Cambodia to be part of the world community. They're interested in ideas from outside the country. They're interested particularly in the United States. Every young Khmer student wants to come to America. It's amazing. Unfortunately, they can't all come. But the point is, of course, is that those kinds of connections, it's not the battle for Cambodia, the battle so that those 5 issues that I talked about work out in a good direction. It's going to take years. And so I think for us Americans, what we got to do is we got to is we got to find ways to develop those connections with Cambodia so we can influence the thinking of the young people, that we can slowly but surely kind of pull them in a democratic and in a direction, pull the whole country, especially the young people, in a more democratic, a direction that more respects human rights, hopefully a more prosperous direction. So I think for us, really, it's and there's a lot of Khmer American organizations that bring students over to study, that have medical missions back to Srok Khmer, and there are all sorts of connections between Cambodian American and Cambodian. I think we got to try to build those and make them bigger and make them more effective.
Thank you. Yes, I heard from your information about Cambodia booming economic. I agree with that. It heavily rely on manufacture more than, although we were labeled as agriculture, but, manufacture is sort of like, a good economy for Cambodia. However, I need your frank opinions on the EBA determination. If it come in August, or say Cambodian government, defy with the EBA decision that, Cambodia no longer get EBA incentive for their economy. So will it survive? And how, for your frank opinion on this one?
So I don't know if everyone knows what EBA means, but it stands for Everything But Arms, EBA. And that's a European Union program that allows Cambodian products shipped to the European Union to enter with no duty paid, so duty free. So it's a big advantage for Cambodia's exports, because when they compete with countries more developed, those more developed countries have to pay the duties, but Cambodian exports, they don't have to pay. So we have a similar program. It's called GSP, but it's not as broad as the European Union's program. And now the European Union has a process underway where they're evaluating whether to remove that everything but arms duty-free treatment for Cambodia. The question the gentleman asked is what will be the impact of that? And at the end of the day, that there's two things to think about. There's a concrete impact of what's going to happen to Cambodian manufacturers if they have to start paying those duties. That's going to make Cambodia less competitive, right? And some of those duties in the garment and footwear sector are very high. For the United States, they tend to range between 7 and 20%. So you can imagine overnight, if you're a factory owner, the products you ship to America are going to face a 20% additional charge. And the guy who buys from you is going to say, well, I could source those in Bangladesh for 20% cheaper. So it's going to have, in that sense, it's going to have a significant impact on Cambodian exports. I don't know enough to know whether it's going to be it's going to be a stop in growth, where I think at the very least it's going to mean that Cambodian exports and industrial growth is going to stop or not grow. Or whether factories will start leaving Cambodia, I'm not sure, but it's going to be one or the other. And then there's a second aspect of what it does about business confidence in Cambodia, because why would you invest in a country? Remember, the reason the European Union and the United States operate these programs is because we know it costs more to do business in poor countries. Electricity costs more, the ports are less good, and so they need a little bit of a help to trade in the world economy. And so I don't know why that what I mentioned, Cambodia needs to advance up the industrial chain, not stay where they are. And so to me, it makes it very difficult to imagine companies coming in to invest in more developed products and more sophisticated. So I think that's the real challenge for Cambodia, not just they lose a few garment factories, but how do they advance in the future if they're not competitive?
Hi, good afternoon. You mentioned that we all can see there's an increase in dominance of China over Cambodia, especially economically. So do you have any concrete examples of the drawbacks or the problems of that dominance? And what's your advice for Cambodian to counterbalance that dominance? Thank you.
If you travel to Cambodia now, you see out the window of your car every mile examples of Chinese economic dominance. And I think that the challenge for Cambodia is most of China's investment has come in two sectors. It's come in real estate, and there's an enormous amount of Chinese real estate development in the Phnom Penh area and further south. It started in Sihanoukville, but it's spreading all the way around to Kampot now. And so those projects go in, they're big. Sometimes they go in, they're well thought through and well designed, and other times they're not. You saw recently there was an example of a building collapsing in Sihanoukville. Oftentimes the interests of the people who live locally, the local people there, sometimes they're respected, sometimes they're not. So that has a lot of social impact on Cambodia. Of course, oftentimes the Chinese investments as well, they're aimed specifically to cater to Chinese tourists. And they bring in Chinese workers to man them because the tourists from China don't speak Khmer, don't speak English either. So they speak Chinese. And so they have to bring in Chinese workers to man the hotels. And then they have to have places for all the Chinese workers to live. And so, at the end of the day, now you go down, you talk to Khmer people in Sihanoukville, it's very difficult to live down there now. Prices have gone up. There's no apartments to rent. The place has been overrun. So, so that's one, is the impact on the local people is one. But for me, there's another one, is it subtly shifts the direction of Cambodia's economy. Because one, they've invested in property development. But the other thing China invests in is in plantation agriculture. Big agricultural projects. Sugarcane. What else? What's the stuff they make tapioca out of? Cassava, right. Sugarcane, cassava, rubber, things like that. China's put a lot of money into that. And the problem with that stuff is it takes a lot of acres and it drives a lot of local people out too. And those are all tough businesses. Like sugarcane is the world's toughest business to make money in that. Prices are low. There's a lot of international competition. You look, almost every country that grows sugar, it's a tough business. So I feel like it shifts Cambodia's economy into a direction where it's kind of a dead end. And so I feel, oh, I forgot casinos. So T mentioned casinos. They've approved, the Khmer government has approved over, I think it's now 70 casinos for Sihanoukville. And so, depends on your views on gambling. I grew up in an anti-gambling state, but I know Khmer people like to gamble. So, we may have different views there. You may view 70 casinos as a good thing, but for me, boy, I don't know if that's a great way to develop either. So.
Okay. Michael.
Were there any challenges or disadvantages you came across when understanding the issues many Cambodians face today?
Wow, that's a kind of a philosophical question, isn't it? Sure, I bring, as an American, even if I have a Khmer wife, and I feel I understand Cambodia better than most Americans, you bring your own attitudes to a situation, right? And so I didn't understand, I only understood late in my tour. There's this, the CPP, the people who run the CPP, they perceive that the United States really doesn't like them. And I'm like, I never really had that personal view. I thought, I don't like some of the things they do, but when you'd hear some of their stories, they would be pretty gripping, these stories. And so I never understood why they didn't think we didn't like them for a long time. And then I sort of figured it out after a couple of years of talking to people. And so why is the Cambodian government so wary of the United States? You know, why is that, you know? And they would all point back to the Vietnam War era, the issues that were going on that these gentlemen spoke about in the first panel. And I would think to myself, I don't know, you know, some of that stuff happened 45 years ago or even 50 years ago. You know, how can that really still be influencing them? It sounds like a made-up excuse to me. But the truth is that some of those attitudes developed over time. And so we're not used to thinking about politics in 50-year timeframes, you know, in the United States. You know, we sort of think in 4-year chunks, you know. You look, if whatever side you support loses the election, you look forward to winning the next one. And so you don't look at who looks at today's American politics in terms of 50 years ago, right? We don't do that. So I had a hard time at first understanding why it was that the Khmer government was so wary of the United States. And especially since I was there right after, you know, that's where Soti and I met in 1998 in Phnom Penh when I was there as the economic, I was in your footsteps there, Barry. I was in your old job. And so, and I was there then. And so I'd been there. I understood what we have been doing in Cambodia for more than 20 years, and it was all good. It really was. I'm very proud of the way the United States, our role in Cambodia since that period, since the Paris Peace Agreement. You can debate about those old issues, about whether we should have played it differently. I get that. And some of the questions before asked that. But since 91, boy, we've been had a good program in Cambodia. And yet the government remains very wary of us. And so it took me a long time to learn that and understand that. So that's one good example.
I'm Buntan, and I heard a lot about laundry money. Do you have any information or any knowledge about the laundry money go through Cambodia? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. This is an example the other way around, why the Khmer government couldn't understand the way we thought. Because we would go up to Cambodians and say, we're worried about money laundering. And they say, why? We would say, well, number Lake Moy, it's entirely dollar economy and it runs in cash. Because that's what Cambodia is. It runs in cash, mostly dollars. Number two, you have 70 casinos. You know, I mean, casinos are tough. Casinos are known as ways to launder money. And number three, there's a lot of property development in Cambodia, and a lot of those new apartments and homes are being bought in cash, dollar cash. We know that too. So there was all this flow in dollars and very little control over it. And so we would say, we would made that point. Cambodia, in fact, has been, there's an international organization designed to help countries fight against laundering money. It's called the Financial Action Task Force. And Cambodia got in trouble with that 2 times already and had to quickly improve their systems, or they would have been had some financial sanctions. And so it's going to be a long-term challenge for Cambodia. For instance, now in Srok Khmer, if you have a big transaction in cash with a bank, the bank has to file what they call a suspicious transaction report, an STR. We have the same system in America. And so that's those things at the airport. If you carry cash more than $10,000, it's similar to that. And so they get them. The banks file these STRs with Cambodia's money laundering organization now, the Cambodia, what is it called? It's Cambodia Counter, I don't know, I can't remember, but it's part of the Ministry of Finance. But there's never been an investigation or a prosecution, never once. Of course, these are powerful people carrying the bags of cash in, and so it's hard. Who wants to prosecute powerful people in Cambodia, right? So that's a challenge. But but money laundering is certainly an issue there. It's not one of the things where we battle, where the United States and Cambodia battle. I think Cambodian government understands that there's a problem there, and they're looking to us and other countries to help them solve it. So.
I would like to ask you, when you were the ambassador for so many years in Cambodia, has anyone from the Cambodian government approached you and asked for help in terms of aid toward the school system? Because when we were there visiting Cambodia, years after years, we met the family and friends who came and complained that their children go to school. This is talking about elementary school, and a whole day of school could be 3 classes or 2 classes. It's not like here, you go to school, you know, 1 whole class until like 2 o'clock or something, you come home, the kid come home. But over there, they can go 2 or 3 hours, and then sometimes the teacher not even there. A few kids told me that when they went to school, the principal come out and said, "Oh, you go home because your teacher is out drinking somewhere." So the system of school is so bad that I hear, you know, story and story, and I concerned about the future of our children, and there's no really a good system over there. It's corruption. The teacher asking for money, 1,000 real here, 500 here, to what a book and pencil or whatever. They sell candy to the kid, all kind of things. I don't know anybody in the government of Cambodia have approached U.S. for any help or any aid during the time that you were there? That's my question.
That's a great question. Because, you know, in a country that has so many young people, you know, we have this sense as Americans that education has got to be important, right? If you have so many young people. And you saw one of Soti's slides, she said that there's now gender parity in Cambodia schools, and that almost all kids, 99% of little ones, are in primary schools. And that's countrywide. So you go, I remember when I was there in the 90s, in Sok Khmer, you'd always see kids hanging around. They weren't in school yet. They were running around the streets begging and stuff during the day. Then I flew down to Vietnam for the week just for tourism. And the Vietnamese kids were already all in school. They all had their uniforms. They were marching around going to school. They were all in school. And Vietnam back then wasn't much wealthier than Sok Khmer. And I said, "Whoa, the Vietnamese got an advantage there." Well, I'm happy to report that 20 years later, the Khmer kids are marching to school now too. And so that access to education, the quantity of education problem has pretty much been solved. But that just leads to the next huge problem, which is the quality, right? The quality of education. And the government is, the most impressive minister in the Cambodian government is their education minister. And they're working hard on that, on getting, and that's where we've been helping is, it's not really for us, you know, Cambodia spends a couple $2 billion a year on education. I mean, they have a lot of kids, even at the way the system works now. So we don't really like finance it directly in that way, but what we're helping them with is curriculum development, because the curriculum is old-fashioned and not very good. And so they need a modern national curriculum that'll prepare the kids for, you know, the job market of the future. And so we've been helping Cambodian education for many years, and Cambodia gets help from other people too, especially the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank have lent Cambodia a lot of money, low interest, very low interest, that are good loans to develop their university system better, to make all sorts of changes. Like now the government has this model school program where giving teachers extra money in certain schools and trying to raise the quality up right away. And of course, nationwide, they've raised teacher school salaries now to $250 a month, which for the first time, that's the kind of salary that you can't really not show up for. You know, in rural Cambodia, in Sok Srai, that's a lot of money, $250 a month. That's not bad. And so the teachers, that's enough to get the teachers to show up. And so, but there's still a long way to go. There really is. There's a long way to go. I mean, so long.
I mean,
But
there's still a long way to go in the sense that, you know, primary level, a lot of the children, actually 99% of the children have access to education, but the schools are holes in the wall, you know, the roof's leaking, the chairs are not work, you know, are broken, those kind of stuff, and to get the school to the level where their neighboring countries are getting education. Cambodia has a long way still, you know. I mean, they don't even have, I mean, forget computer labs or science lab. They don't even have proper buildings to where the, you know, in a lot of countryside. I'm talking about the countryside. In Phnom Penh, of course, you know, you have a bit more modernity, but in the countryside, the schools are still in pretty bad shape as far as the physical structure of the actual school. So you know, they have quite a ways to go yet. But like Bill was saying, the Ministry of Education has made a huge stride in, first of all, reducing the cheating of the exams of the what's it called, Kihao diploma. High school diploma, in graduating from high school diploma. He has made huge stride in making sure nobody cheated. Because, you know, what's the sense if you cheat anyway, you're not coming out, you're not going to be a competitive workforce when you come out and join the workforce. So
I want to add one point, is we do fund, in terms of a direct intervention in the school programs, we do fund a very large school feeding program. And we fund that at almost $20 million a year. It comes from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And it ensures that I think it's over 2,000 schools, mostly in the northwest of the country, the poorest regions. The kids come to school and then they get breakfast at school, you know, this big pile of, it's like rice, and they put lentils in it. Oh, the rice is fortified, incidentally, you know, so we have fortification plants where they fortify the rice so there's more vitamins and minerals in it, because Khmer kids, a lot of them are malnourished. So they get fortified rice with lentils in it, and then they put canned fish on top, which actually Japan gives. Japan gives the canned fish. We give the rice and lentils. And so then they get these big, I mean, they eat a lot, these kids, you should see it. And so and that makes them all show up, right? And then they have a full belly, and so then they learn better in school, because if you're clean and you're sitting there in the back of class and there's 40 kids in the classroom and the teacher's talking, it's hard to learn, right? So we support this school funding program, and the government likes this program a lot, and they're thinking about using their own money, because it's not that expensive, using their own money to make it a nationwide program so that across Cambodia, all the kids are going to get the breakfast when they come to school. And so that's a good thing. The problem there is, of course, is that they have day, afternoon, and morning school shifts now because there's so many kids. Like when I grew up in Pennsylvania in the 60s, we had the same thing. We had morning and afternoon systems. So
Ming Danny had a question up here in the yellow, right here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Hai and Mrs. Satir. It's an honor for you all to be here today and allow us to learn about Cambodia. After I heard about the situations of Cambodian women and children in Cambodia, it's very sad. And I have seen that for myself. I went back there in May for the public health research. My question to you is that have you continued doing the relationships, empowerment, those group of youngsters? And how can we help you? How can we help them? Who can we contact if our organization or my group from here heading over to Cambodia? We want to empower them, strengthen them, and also supporting them. Will you be able to continue to work with them? And another thing that I have did my research in May, especially in healthcare. I work at University of Washington here, Medical Center. And I understand that healthcare is the big issue in America and the same thing in Cambodia. And I learned that the woman can't even deliver her baby due to there is no money. And so the baby and mom is die. So is there a universal healthcare in Cambodia? And if there's a universal universal healthcare in Cambodia, why can't the woman is deliver her baby? So what can we do from here as a Cambodian woman that we can empower those women in Cambodia so that we all can support them and can give them a better, mental support or whatever what we can do.
So, I mean, that's a lot of issue. That's a lot of, a big question. There's no one answer that would satisfy that kind of question, but I can say that fortunately there's a lot of international organizations, donors, and non-governmental organizations that are still to this day working very actively with women's groups, encouraging them to participate in society issues and stuff like that. So in a slide I showed you earlier, the businesswoman association have formed. There's a few of them now that have formed that serve as a channel through which other women can come to them and seek out advice on how to establish a medium-sized business, how to register, stuff like that, that would help women to feel more confident in supporting their families or being a active members of their family and contributing to the income and the economic situation of their family. So there are a lot of organizations in Cambodia that work on women's gender issues and health issues that you can, depending on which specific field you are interested in, because there are a lot of fields, right? Gender equality is a huge field. You have to know which one you're passionate in and how do you want to help, and I mentioned earlier, mental health is a huge gap. There's just not enough professionals, there's not enough taught in school, there's just not enough being talked about in Cambodian society. We tend to sort of assume that everyone is okay. We tend to assume that if trauma happened, oh well, eventually you'll get over it and that's fine. So there's not a lot of detailed information or in-depth information on that. And Cambodia can use a lot more mental health profession and professionals, really. And also, as far as poverty reductions, there's a lot you can do in poverty reductions for Cambodian women, and that would have to be, you would have to focus on the rural areas, and on healthcare. Also, the Ministry of Women's Affairs, they have recently been assigned to work more actively on promoting women in all aspects of her life. To set up training courses and financial courses where some of these businesswomen, they don't know how to deal with financial stuff. Their business hit a certain level and they kind of stuck there. They don't know how to take that next step to be a bigger business. A lot of the businesses that women own, they themselves are the employee. They are the only employee in that business, or they and one more person. So, that group of business need to take the next step to make it, to formalize it, register it and formalize it and make it an actual medium-sized or small to medium-sized companies. That's a step that a lot of Cambodian women need help with, registering their business, you know, starting paying wages and paying the taxes, you know, all that stuff they're not familiar with, especially when their education level is low. They tend to be at a disadvantage when it comes to their male, comparing to their male counterparts. On healthcare, I know that recently the government have something called Ban Krai Kro, that they it's a poverty card that issue to certain families of certain income can qualify, can obtain this Ban Krai Kro, and when they go to get healthcare, they are not charged. It's free. Yeah. On top of that, the government has also recently issued additional incentive money to pregnant women to go for her prenatal care. Every time she goes, she gets a certain amount of Khmer Real. I think probably like Mamon. You know, every time she goes for prenatal checkup, she gets that money. So it's an incentive for a woman to go to follow through with her prenatal checkup and post-natal, what's called post-birth, checkup as well for vaccinations for the child, all that stuff. So, so then you sort of have the poverty level taken care of. And then, you know, the people who are working in companies and stuff, they have health insurance through their companies. What's left is the people in the middle. Yeah, the saleswoman at the market, the girls who works at, the lady who works at a salon. Those are the population that's the healthcare can either, you know, that's not really working well for them because they don't have enough money to buy insurance, and at the same time, you know, they're not in a job that has all that insurance, health insurance to protect them. So that's the population where if the cost of healthcare is expensive, they're in trouble. Yeah.
Okay, we're just gonna do one more question and then we'll have to end. Bensa, right here in the front.
Okay, you know, I was a policeman, now turned a community organizer. My question is that there are a bunch of Cambodian America in Cambodia now. Is there any sense of organizing up there? And is there any approach to the U.S. embassy asking for help or whatever? Did you hear about that or nothing?
So that's I'm gonna have to keep this a short answer because I know we're out of time. But you know, there was honestly, I feel like there was a little distrust between the Khmer government and Khmer Americans because they feel like the Khmer Americans, I don't know if it's a historical thing that the Khmer Americans were the ones that got out, or that the CNRP has done a lot of recruiting in the Khmer American communities, but there was a lot of distrust. But what I was very happy to see during the time we were in Cambodia is that there's a lot of young Khmer Americans coming back, and they are simply doing good businesses. And I'll tell you, the biggest technology company in Cambodia is run by a Khmer American guy. He was born in Cambodia, came to his Khmer is not even as good as mine, I'll be honest with you. Although he looks Khmer, so he has an advantage. And so, and he's just a tech guy, and he's got this great company. They employ about 160 Cambodians. They're doing a bunch of work for eBay and other American e-commerce sites. These kids are making good money, and they're leaving and forming companies on their own. And there are 4 or 5 young Khmer American people like that. And the Khmer government sees that now, and they think, oh, maybe we need to reevaluate our attitudes towards the Cambodian American community. And so I feel there's really a very exciting road forward where Cambodia needs human resources of every kind. They don't have enough mathematicians, they don't have enough teachers, they don't have enough computer scientists, they don't have enough economists, they just lack human resources. They don't have enough nurses and doctors to help women give birth. They don't have They don't have anything. They need human resources of every kind. And so when Khmer Americans come back and help them in that way, incidentally, there are Khmer Americans in the government too, as you know. So I think they're starting to be, there's this way forward for the Khmer community here and the Khmer community there to help each other out a lot. And so that's one of the reasons I'm most optimistic about Cambodia, is because I can see how we can help them going forward.
Okay, one last question. Is there any discretionary fund in the embassy to help small organization, and what kind of program you fund so far?
We have a lot of funds at the embassy. I'm not at the embassy anymore, so
Oh,
the embassy has a lot. The embassy helps a lot of people. I don't know. Discretionary is a funny word in the government because every fund has its reason that we have it. But we have a lot of funds that we use to help great young Cambodian Americans all the time. We bring them to America to learn about America. We bring them here to study. We bring Americans over there. We fund small businesses. We have a new aid program focused exclusively on women-owned businesses. $5 million over 3 years. We're helping them. So we have a lot of programs that reach out directly to the Khmer people. So but once again, I'm not at the embassy anymore. So thank you. Okun, everyone. Okun Charan. Thank you.